Thanks.
Okay, they just hid your screen, so it just says Ward 5 Walker. All right, and then Kelsey's going to work on getting that. Okay.
Okay. Are we live right now, folks? IT. I'm sorry, you came in garbled.
Yes, we're live on YouTube.
Live on YouTube. Thanks, Tim. Okay, we're going. I now call to order the April 6, 2020 workshop of the Auburn City Council. First on the agenda is slated to be the city manager's proposed budget. I'm going to do a test. Can the city manager hear me right now? I'm not getting audio. They're working out some bugs. We're going to move over.
How do we do this?
Peter, are you in?
No, he's still on mute.
Okay, Peter, if you can hear us, we cannot hear you. Okay, Phil, can you hear me?
He's muted.
Okay, folks, we're just for those listening and watching at home, just a couple technical glitches with our city manager. Councilor Walker is on, video is off right now. So.
Okay, Mayor.
Phil?
Yes.
Are we good to go?
Yes.
Mr. Manager.
So he's hearing you. I'll be able to bring up the screen. I think we'll start with strategic plan, if that's all right.
Very good. So let's go to strategic plan update first, and then we'll go from there. Thank you very much, Phil.
So Mayor and Council, thank you and good evening. As we work through some of these challenges, we'll work out some of these kinks as we move forward. One thing that Peter and I, hopefully Peter will be joining us here shortly. One thing that we wanted to cover with you was the strategic planning, the prioritization that each of you have done and participated in. As you know, this has been a long process for us. We've been working through this presentation and wanting to bring this in, especially now for the budget process as well as the CIP presentation. Peter, you with us now?
I'm with you now. Can you hear me? Yeah. Getting an echo because of this phone. Sorry about that. So as you'll remember, there are 11 strategies that were recommended as final recommendations of the strategic plan. You can see them all there. We asked you to rank them. Why don't you go to the next slide, Phil? So this is the staff's input. The communications plan, Great Falls development, walkable downtown, public safety building, which was part of the public services and infrastructure priority, and then arts, culture, history, and recreation. And here's the results of the survey that we did with you. The communications plan is there, downtown, Great Falls development, neighborhoods, pedestrian, walkways, and so forth, and then arts, culture, and recreation. Now, this is not a scientific process, right? I mean, what we're doing here is we're trying to get your direction in terms of what you think makes sense for strategies for the city and what should be our highest priorities. I want to mention that with the CIP, you're going to find that 28 of the items in the CIP are related to public services and infrastructure. So I would say that's an area that certainly needs to be a priority. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of what we do as a city. So that's something for you to think about. Bill, you want to go to the next slide? Oh, that's a fun one to read.
So this was just a demonstration of your actual scoring, how each person scored for the 11 categories that we had for consideration.
And there's a relationship between what the staff thought and what you thought. There's a lot of correlation there between the two groups, as you can see. And then, as I mentioned before, in the CIP itself, you'll see a number of items that are related to the strategic plan priorities, which I'll be presenting this Thursday. I tried to make that connection when I presented the 5-year CIP to show the correlation between the strategies in the strategic plan and the CIP items. I think that's the last slide, Phil.
Yes, it is.
So, Mayor and councilors, I don't know if you want to have a discussion at this point, give some feedback to Phil and myself.
Yeah, I think if we could have that conversation. And again, this portion of the workshop is about our strategic planning priorities. So without getting into the nitty gritty of CIP specific issues, I can wait till Thursday, of course. I'll open it up. And is there any counselor that wants to begin?
Can we look quickly at slide number 2 where we had the breakdown of how each of us voted? Because I didn't see each individual vote for each individual counselor. It looked like there were some 1s and 0s, but I think it was maybe second or third slide.
About the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one following this slide. Yeah, so can you explain this a little bit better? Because each of us we each ranked the 11 categories. So technically we should all have 1 through 11. Is that correct? Or are you showing the number of, what is this graph showing? I guess if somebody can add some clarification here, that'd be great.
Liz, are you on?
Yes, this is actually not by counselor. This is by strategy. So this is purely number of votes. Counselor Boss. We didn't give a breakdown of how each counselor voted to just kind of keep that anonymous, I suppose, but we certainly could provide that to the group if you wanted it.
So I guess my question is, we all ranked each of the 11 strategies. So there should be a vote for each of the 11 strategies, correct? So I'm confused by the 0s, I guess, is my point.
Did someone leave something blank, in other words? And was it, I think, just confirm, was it?
Let me try to explain it if I can.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Mike. So when we mute, we can't come back on until Kelsey lets us back in. So we're kind of working out that kink. That's why it was dead air there for a little while.
All right.
So
I think this chart shows there's going to be 0s because some, for instance, schools and education got no votes.
no, let me try to explain it for everybody. Everything got a vote. So if you look at the first one going down, you may not see this infrastructure necessarily voted in that first box, because that means it's actually somewhere else along the line. You're going to see where you have a total score of 8 on each one of these categories. That means when you're going down, 4 people chose communications as their first priority. Do you see that right there in that first box?
Exactly.
And then 0 people chose it for a second category.
Gotcha.
So for infrastructure, 0 people showed it for a number 1, but 1 person said, that's my number 2. And if I use this one going across infrastructure, you have this individual here. 0 people said that that was going to be their number 1, but 1 said number 2, 1 said number 3. 0 people said it was their number 4, and so on going across. Does that make
That's really
sense?
helpful.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Because I was going to say for that previous slide where you had the bar graph, the averages are helpful, but only if you know what is constructing that average. So if you could have a lot of people who think that that strategy is kind of middle ground in terms of their priority, or it could be split between half of the group thinks it's the top priority and half of it thinks it's lower, which is causing that middle average. So this slide is really helpful. Thank you for adding it.
Yeah. So when you look at communications plan and it's 9.5, that's because 4 people
Yeah.
chose that for their number 1, and 4 people of the 8 chose it for their number 4.
Mhm.
So that's why that scoring is where it's at. And then there were no other scores for any other category for communications plan because you all voted either 1 or 4 as your 4th highest priority.
Good explanation, Phil.
Thank you. Are there any more clarifying questions on this? On the data? Okay, let's roll into some knowledge and wisdom. And I'm going to actually call on Counselor Lasagna. She had a question. She sent by a chat. Just so the public knows, we are not chatting or having any type of private conversation on the side. So if counselors do want to talk, make a recommendation, whatnot, they can just raise their hand and then I'll call on them or Kelsey will. So Counselor Lasagna.
Can we go to the next slide that shows the city staff and the council recommendations and how they aligned? Thank you. What if we look at the CIP and something that is foregrounded in the CIP does not show up here? What if they don't align? What takes precedence? How do we make the decision of where to put, for example, I know that in the CIP doing a study to be able to look at a safety building is in there, but it doesn't show up here.
So I think that's a good question. If you look at, that's why we're trying to show this slide here. You can see all the different items that Peter has in his CIP. But if you look at public service infrastructure, I think a lot of voting thought that this was just for the public safety building. It was one of those categories, obviously. But if you look at public service and infrastructure, this is the majority of your capital improvement, although it scored 7th out of your list. But if you think of any road repair, paving, anything like that, it's coming in under public service infrastructure. So even though here, you'll see it as ranked number 7, it's a big portion of what you fund in your capital improvement. So those things will still continue. And I think as a council, you'll need to talk about that. And I think you'll all would agree that paving roads is a high priority. However, in the strategic plan ranking, it just didn't list road repair or those other items. It just said infrastructure to public service. Does that help?
Yeah, that does help, but it does have a question of, okay, now how do we sort of square those things? But I'll leave it at that. I don't need an answer. That's part of our work.
I
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
I think you need to listen to what is said during the presentations on the budget. And you'll hear from each department director on the CIP items, and you'll be able to judge for yourself.
Peter, when they talk to us, do they make sure that and we've had previously people have done this, that they frame it as looking at the strategic plan to make sure that what they're talking to us about, where it fits in the strategic plan and they're thinking around that?
I think the department directors, as you know, have been involved in the strategic plan process for the most part. And they'll be able to comment on how they think it aligns with the strategic plan. And follow up on what Phil said, I think on the infrastructure and public services, the public safety building, I think probably took precedence with a lot of us, including the staff, not thinking about the fact that we have so many items that we do in the CIP that are related to public services or infrastructure. As I said before, 28 items in the CIP are related to that category.
If I could, and let's transition, let's segue this conversation a little bit to, first of all, are there any other data questions, clarifying questions? I'd like to have this slide up if there's not, so we can segue. Counselors? And as a reminder, if you go down to participants or panelists and hit the raise your hand button, or just do it the old fashioned way, I'll probably see you, okay? Okay, so none being right now, let's segue a little bit into priorities. When the strategic planning was done, obviously it happened in layers. The community was very much involved along with staff to come up with these clusters. We then have to prioritize, and we have, and this is part of this process through this, through the ranking, if you would, ranking process. Now we actually have to talk about, A, do we like the ranking? Okay, this is not a time to argue or maybe defend what your personal favorite portion would be or project, but really look at how is this ranking going to affect the city in a positive way, long and short term? And really, what does it mean? There's one part of any strategic plan that always it eludes the public, it eludes elected officials, which is the actual project. What is going to define a neighborhood? What's going to define growth in your downtown or the Great Falls area? What are those issues? I think we need to start thinking about that. And I'd like to open this up to looking at priorities 1 through 5. Do we have any issues with those priorities? Do we think that there was something wrong with the tabulation, or we needed further more description or further explanation in order to have voted more correctly, if you would? So I'll leave it at that. Is there anybody with a comment? Councilor Lasagna?
So stop me if this is not what you're looking for, but what it shows to me again is this focus on downtown. If you look at the first 5.
Oh, I saw you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
They can be focused on the downtown. And I think that's helpful because that was one of our original, when we had a retreat, what we talked about is the downtown. So it's nice to see that people have kind of focused on that.
During our workshop, or retreat rather, counselors, you instructed, we had a conversation, and it was unanimous that the focus of this city council with regards to above and beyond the brick and mortar maintenance of our roads and infrastructure, if you would, to Peter's point, we're going to need plow trucks, we're going to need replacement vehicles. Those are just infrastructure things that have to happen on a consistent basis. But we all talked about downtown development, and we kind of defined our downtown. I'm going to ask, does everybody on the council still want to go down that path where our focus now, should it still be on downtown redevelopment or enhancement? Councilor Lasagna?
Mr. Mayor, do you want to define a little bit further our focus? Just what do you mean by our focus? You mean in terms of what we do with the budget, in terms of planning? I think just for the general, the public.
There's 3 aspects to any successful plan. There's data, which we have reams of. There's knowledge, which I'd like to believe that our staff is, and our council and elected officials have in abundance. And then there's wisdom. And the wisdom has to come from elected officials. And when we apply data, knowledge, and then wisdom, which is the actual action, and what does that mean? What does that entail in order to achieve a goal or an intent? That's what I'm getting at, Councilor Lasagna. So if downtown development is where our focus with regard to our strategic plan priority is, now how do we layer in these other i.e. arts, culture, and recreation? How do we layer that in? How do we start tying this all together? And what does it really mean? How do we define downtown? How do we define success? And in what time frame? Does that answer your question? I just want to get some general consensus that we still want to continue to focus on downtown. Things have changed, time has elapsed. Councilor Milks?
Yeah, I can tell you that my priorities continue to be the same, where I'm interested in enterprise in the downtown, redevelopment of that area, improving the existing housing stock, quality of life in the neighborhoods for our kids and the people that live here. So I'm very encouraged by this result because I think that goes along with what the goal of the strategic plan was from the people that participated in it. That's my 2 cents.
Anybody else? Any comments? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During our retreat, we talked about defining the land portion of our downtown, the boundaries. I think that would be a starting point.
In our discussion, we had said that it was going to run from River Road in New Auburn down through Main Street and across the way over onto up to the Turner Bypass. What we had originally said was going to be the focus of the downtown. That's what
I
I was.
thought we also included up to the Parks and Rec building.
Well, along that line, in the way of, that's going to be the connectivity through the neighborhoods and the recreation, because I remember you brought that up, going straight across the way into there by the Franklin Park and then going up over the hill and into the Pettingill area.
Yeah.
So that sort of ties in with the neighborhood part of the development of the downtown.
Yeah, I'd like to include that area on the other side of Union as well, right?
So
On the rec side.
let's define, okay? Now, I don't like necessarily, when we're talking focus, okay, and our downtown is our downtown, there's the entire downtown that could really expand all the way out to Gamage Park, any place with urban concentration or even suburban residential concentration. But if we can agree on one thing, geographically, what is the central point of our city for this conversation? I'd like to suggest that it's Great Falls Plaza. And then
And-
everything radiates from there.
And South Main Street sort of as one, I don't want to have Court Street separate those two. I want to see them as one unit.
But it starts at a focal point and radiates out from there. Correct? Can we agree on that as a council?
I might think of South Main Street as the focal point.
As South Main Street,
Mhm.
the street itself?
Yeah,
What
that's
part of the street?
the street that currently has the businesses in it, Gritty's that area.
By
But-
Great Falls, okay, by Festival Plaza, right, that, then call it the
Festival
corner.
Plaza would be the focal point.
Say again?
So that would make like Festival Plaza the focal point.
Right, okay, so South Main Street, Festival Plaza is a focal point.
Mhm.
And Mr. Mayor, you sent us, I think you sent it to all of us, an outline that you had when you looked at demographics and data about
Yes.
what you find as the downtown area.
I did. I'll explain that now just for everybody, including staff. I asked staff, based upon our workshop, to pull demographics on a 5-minute walk from South Main Street, Gritty's Festival Plaza. Our GIS department did that. They actually have access to census data in order to pull demographics, age, and income. Within a 5-minute walk, a pedestrian walk, which leads into our conversation about walkability. But within that 5-minute walk of that South Main Street Festival Plaza area, we had around 900 daytime residents, residents, with an average family income of annually $18,000. Compared to the city of Auburn as a whole, our average income is $48,000. So significantly lower demographic with regards to income. Age split was pretty much, there was no off center or off balance compared. So it was a good split of age. That was as far as we got into. Obviously there's a very large workforce, daytime workforce that comes into this area. but from what it seems, they're in and they're out. So we did not study their average income level. So looking at that resident population of that downtown. So when we look at that data and we look at what our focus is, I guess it's a good time to keep moving along the conversation is, so what, if we could go back to that slide, I think it's still there, I just have to minimize. What else in our priority or strategic planning will feed into a vibrant, commercially viable downtown? Is a term that I heard during our retreat. Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I would hope that we're going to include the New Auburn area that we have spent $1 million or more. That's supposed to be bringing a lot of people down here in New Auburn. As far as walkability, every summer I see many, many people that work at the banks and stuff across the river walking this way up Main Street. Now, when you people talk South Main Street, that goes up over the hill in New Auburn. It does not come towards Court Street. So when you talk South Main Street, you confuse some people.
Yeah.
Main Street is Festival Plaza. South Main Street starts after Rowley's, goes up over the hill and heads out towards the Pownell Road and that area. So we got to be sure we're talking about the places that we really believe we know what we're saying here. But I want us to suggest that New Auburn would be, you know, the new downtown added to the old downtown that's been left out for years, that we've been spending a lot of money on, that's taken us far longer than it should to get what we should be getting done in this New Auburn Park.
Councilor McLeod?
I agree with Councilor Walker. We should be going from the Peace Bridge all the way up to where the falls are, following the river, and focus on that as our new downtown kind of area zone and radiate out from there. So almost Bonnie Park being the center of that and making the walkability all the way from the Peace Bridge all the way up the Riverwalk, and somehow work on connecting all of that together.
Okay, so it's interesting, and let me just play a little bit of devil's advocate. First of all, Councilor Walker, thank you for kind of defining that. I was getting confused on South Main Street, and I was getting, even in my head, getting a little discombobulated, but talking about Main Street, Festival Plaza. I just want to further define so everybody knows, when you're talking about spheres of influence and economic development, you're talking about having ground zero, if you would, a literal point in which concentric spheres of influence happen from that. It's not to say you ignore anything on a middle or outward sphere, okay? But you do have a radius, like a spoken hub, if that makes sense. If that becomes elongated, then sometimes what you do is you really kind of muddle the waters or dilute the effort or the effect that you're trying to get through capital investment. So, you know, we understand Main Street, our downtown is really, truly from the Rollerdrome, all of New Auburn, all the way down to Turner Street Bypass and down into the gully in the park. We understand that, but where do we work from? How do we focus in? And then how do we compare New Auburn Village development with our opportunity zone with what we might have that's more readily available or less readily available downtown by Roach Block, Festival Plaza area? So that's where I think we need to start. I think we can all agree that our downtown is pretty elongated along the river, includes New Auburn, includes downtown, and goes up to Turner Street Bypass and down to the gully. So that said, addressing walkability, and this is an important thing, if we look back at our strategic planning, walkability was kind of in the middle of the pack. You do have to have things to walk from to. So people aren't going to park at Bonnie Park and walk. They're going to park probably in our parking garage or other designated, parking area, and then walk from there out. So just something to think about while we look at these top five. Pedestrian came in at 4. Any other call? I think, this conversation is what we have. We have time for it today before Peter goes into talking about the budget, probably another 10 minutes or something or so. But is there any other comments? Councilor Walker.
Yeah, the other comment is that we're going to spend somewhere around $1 million plus to do new traffic lighting, new sidewalks, and a new Mill Street coming off the bridge, again, coming from the Lewiston side. And again, during the day, we have many people that walk from the, the banks that are over there and Luigi's and them areas. They walk into New Auburn, and we're supposed to build a nice walkway that's coming around Rowley's that we haven't completed yet. We've been at for 6 years plus. And then we get to sometimes Bonnie Park and we cross the trestle, or we go all the way down Main Street and we cross the bridge. But either way, depending on the lunch hour that you may have and the time that you have, again, I'm telling you, we have anywhere from 50 to 100 people that walk that in the afternoon that I'm sure isn't part of your calculations that you're looking at for the downtown next to the parking garage, for instance. But again, I think we are, in the past, we have put a lot of money aside to bring New Auburn into this connection. And I don't think we want to look at it as it's a long gate or whatever. We want it to be part of the whole downtown city, and we want to be considered part of that. That's why we are, I hope, spending the kind of money we've been spending and trying to bring some new businesses to the New Auburn area.
Councilor Milks?
Yeah, and so my thought then from there would be looking at number 3, neighborhoods. I agree. I completely agree with Councilor Walker that we want to maximize that investment in New Auburn. So between New Auburn and Great Falls Plaza, there's several neighborhoods there that we should be looking at if we're going to maximize the investment in New Auburn and we want to develop the downtown. There's probably a couple neighborhoods that we should look at there about how do we improve the status of those neighborhoods.
Okay, so let's look at that. Well, hold on. We had a couple hands. Councilor McLeod, then Councilor Lasagna.
So I had 2 things. The census data, that would be almost 9-year-old information at this point.
Actually, no, it's updated annually,
Okay.
though not through the official decade census. So the
Okay.
data we have there, I think it was from 2018 or 2019.
Okay, perfect. And the second part I had was about the communication plan. I guess when I had picked that one, it seemed to me the communication plan was more us communicating as a city what we are doing outward to everybody, so everybody's able to be more connected, rather than advertising for what Auburn is. So not that it was confusing, but I just thought of it more as we need to do a better job communicating out to the citizens and have a way for them to communicate back to us, which is why I think it scored so high, because it seems like a fairly easy one to tackle.
Okay. Would you not have, I'm going to ask a question, would you not have voted for it, Councilor McLeod, if there was a heavy lean on brand?
No, no, because it's all rolled into one. I think I just didn't get to answer earlier when you had asked if there was any clarifying questions about how they were worded. I think if we'd worded that together as communication, branding, and advertising type thing, it probably still would have fallen where it is.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councilor Lasagna?
So I think when you talk about concentric circles in terms of energy and development, it might be good to sort of work out what that looks like. I'm not saying now, but it seems, Mr. Mayor, like you have a pretty good idea of that process and how that could look, and you may have a couple of different models. So I think that would be good to see, and physically maybe the outline that we're talking about, perhaps at the next council meeting. And the other thing I wanted to note about the data that came through is there are a good number of millennials in that data. I was surprised to see how many. They're first or second in terms of age group. And I think that's something to really pay attention to as well.
You know, the age split was really interesting there. It frankly was different than I assumed before getting this data.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the corresponding map that came with it, it was also interesting that 5-minute walk didn't go all the way up to, let's say, Spring Street, the northern boundary consistently. I don't think the average income would have changed significantly if it went to more of a border, Elm to Spring to Academy and Court, let's say. Population would have changed a little bit, but I don't think anything else would have fundamentally changed. It would be interesting if Phil, if you're on this, if maybe we can look back, as Councilor Zania recommended, and actually based upon everybody talking about downtown, if we could redraw and pull data based upon including from New Auburn all the way down to the Gully, up to Spring.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
And you could impose the concentric circles that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, and it may be that you have a concentric circle that starts at New Auburn. And I apologize for the South Main Street. Thank you, Councilor Walker, for correcting me, that you may start with a concentric circle there and also one at Festival Plaza and see where they overlap. That may also give us an idea of a focal point to connect the two areas.
Councilor Boss.
I think it would also be really helpful to have an understanding of how big of a geographic scope in total we're looking for, because that will help us to decide where the epicenter should be. If we're thinking only a 1 mile radius is the area that we should be looking at in terms of our downtown, or if it's 10, you know, we need to know kind of the broader scope so that we can decide what's included, what's not, where should the center be. And I also just wanted to mention too that the data is not surprising to me in terms of the millennial numbers in our downtown. There's a National Association of Home Buyers study that just came out at the end of last year that really showed very definitively that young people are looking to live in urban residential, either cities, very urban, or urban residential neighborhoods. So we really need to be keeping that in mind when we're talking about who's living in our downtown housing and what are we doing to redevelop our housing in our downtown areas generally.
I just put up the first map that the mayor was talking about. This was the area that was covered. You can see it goes quite a ways on Main Street, just beyond Academy, almost to where you would see Laurel and Newbury Street. And then on the other end, it's all of Great Falls Plaza and goes up to Drummond and Spring Street, and then only a portion. But what we can do is, as was mentioned, we can come all the way across, come up through Minot Avenue. So that way there it's including all of Spring, Pleasant, High, and then come across and then pick up this block, which I think Councilor Milks is talking about, maybe Goff Street, using Goff Street down towards Union Street bypass. And I think Councilor Lasagna, you're talking about maybe then drawing from this those circles, right? So that we can drill into some of this data based on certain areas, but we can give a full snapshot as well.
I might want to edit that a little, I think, in council, please. When you're looking at this map, you know, we could look at downtown, we can look at, you know, across Union Street bypass, but there's that old saying, the other side of the tracks. There's a reason that saying came about, because it was a physical barrier for movement for people. They couldn't cross an interstate overpass, they couldn't cross railroad tracks. Those, you know, wherever they are randomly in most cities, but that helped define what that downtown is. And downtown, again, the second part of what the council said was a downtown commercially viable district.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to have, at least I gather from that phrase, we're going to look at where our current businesses are, expand upon them to make them commercially viable versus starting new commercial enterprises, let's say off Goff Street. So first, again, focusing in on a commercially viable downtown, that needs to also influence what we're calling our downtown for this strategic planning initiative.
Yeah, so to add, the downtown is the commercially viable area, but then you still have your neighborhoods and walkability would have there'd be crossover in those concentric circles. So we might not be looking to develop commercially viable stuff out by the Gully, but we're looking to improve neighborhoods and walkability there while we're developing commercially viable in the downtown area and improving walkability.
As long as we have a finite amount of money.
Yep.
We're going to have to prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's in my opinion, based upon just practical experience living in other parts of the country and visiting, you have to have something to walk to before you invest in walkability.
Yeah.
So we need to focus on having the destination. That will naturally push our focus to be on the connectivity because you have something to connect with.
Yeah.
So I want to just pivot to the city manager real quick. Mr. Manager, how much time are you going to need to go into your budget? We're at 6:10 right now.
My presentation probably is probably going to take 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Well, let's, if council, if you're okay, is there any last thoughts on this? We can always come back to this. We have time. Is there any last thoughts on our strategic planning right now before we pivot into the city councilor's budget presentation? Because I think that's going to help influence a little bit of our conversation going forward.
I would like to see the map that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, in terms of concentric circles, because how big a circle is could, as Councilor Boss was saying, define, do we want a mile across, 2 miles, 3 miles across? I don't know. There's probably a definition for what.
Yeah, there is. There is. Unfortunately, you can't make those concentric circles yet because we haven't evolved in our conversation enough to say, what is the nucleus? Okay, it's great to arbitrarily say the circles radiate out from Festival Plaza. Okay, then that's one portion, but how do they radiate? In other words, is Festival Plaza as a standalone a big enough draw to attract new residents, rehabilitate buildings, and new commercially viable businesses? What is that nucleus? What are we? In other words, here's where we have to go, you know what? In order for this to happen, we need to invest in X. That's the part of the city council, this conversation that we need to develop into. I need to hear that. If you say to create a 4-story bowling alley in New Auburn, okay, guess where the circle starts? 4-story bowling alley in New Auburn.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think we can do a thought experiment with these and say, okay, if this is the center of the concentric circle here, what does this look like? If this is the circle.
You can't do it. You can't do it because it's just a thought process, and we could be spinning that wheel for a year. By then, I'm going to be totally honest and frank. I think the wisdom comes from this council and the experience. We have to look at where, what, and then have the political will to do it.
Well, one of the other things we also need to consider, everybody needs to consider, and I think Tim touched on it a minute ago, and when he was talking about the types of buildings, we already have an established neighborhood down there that runs along the river. It's an older established neighborhood. So as we look at development down there, we're going to be looking at development where we want a downtown retail plus a living. We're going to be looking at buildings sort of like what we see on Spring Street there across from Hannaford. Something that has a viable retail underneath with livability up above. To start that, you have to have the retail spaces that people can move into to get the draw. Then we'll hope that the rest of the neighborhoods will improve their stock as it goes along. But that's something that everybody needs to be thinking about when we start to look at the overall project, is where can we put those types of buildings? Where is there still space to put those types of buildings so that we can get that draw to the downtown?
And let me be clear, if this was not, and this conversation wasn't happening in the middle of a very sudden crash in our economy and the onslaught of a recession, I would say right now that I'm being possessed by a socialist, and government's place is not in the building of buildings, and government's place is not in social engineering, if you would. But this is a drastic time, and I think it will benefit our city long term if we take drastic measures. So with that said, though, I'm going to take a couple-minute break unless there's something else that someone wants to add, so Peter can get set up. So I'll do a recess for 5 minutes, then we'll jump into the budget. We can always come back again to this if we have time today. Anything else? Okay, very good. We're going to stand in a 5-minute recess. If you all could just place your cameras off and your mics on mute, we'll reconvene here at 6:18.
I don't know if anybody can hear me. That's a good sign. All right.
A lot of feedback there, Peter.
Yeah, that's because I had him on my phone, so we were getting double speakers. Peter, can you hear us now?
Chelsea, I don't think he can. He still came in under you.
He did still come in under me, which he shouldn't have with the link I just sent him. So bear with us.
Are you on video or not?
Hello, is anyone on?
Peter in. It's still not working.
Where are you?
Does everybody have their budget books, by the way?
No.
Or you don't need no book. Hey, before Councilor McLeod gets back on, can someone buy him a picture for his home office? Peter coming?
He is attempting to log back
Leroy, is Newbury in the opportunity?
Good, Phil?
Mayor, looks like we're all set to start.
Okay, very good then. We're back now from recess. Thank you very much. Next up is the city manager, Peter Crane, and he is going to go with our annual budget presentation. Peter, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Bill, if you could put that up on the screen. Here we go. Okay. So let me just start by saying that department directors and the team that worked with each department director did a great job. I did cut over 500,000 from the original request, and I did ask the department directors to submit what they thought they needed. After I give my presentation, Phil is going to spend a few moments talking with you about the budget booklets that you've all received and kind of walking you through the budget booklets. Bill, next slide. Thanks. So in terms of the operating expenses for the city, they increased 4.33%. Keep in mind, we have our insurance, which is going up 9%. We also have the 2% cost of living increase, and then we also have money that's earmarked for the equipment operators from the compensation study that was done a couple of years ago. This is the next phase of implementing that study. The city debt service is going up 2.34%, so the city expenses are going up 3.82%. The intergovernmental agencies that work with the city includes the Lewis and Auburn Transportation Committee, 911, the airport, other agencies. That amount is going up 7.64%. On the city's operating expenses, here are the raw numbers that I just spoke about in terms of percentage increases. Next slide, Phil. So on this particular page, what you have there at the top and the total expenses, council's adopted budget for the fiscal year that we're in now is $90,192,648, including the city, the intergovernmental costs, as well as the school department. For the FY21 budget, the original request was $94,040,194. What I'm proposing is $93,337,790 for an increase of 3.3 million. And again, that's the city expenses along with this intergovernmental expenses in the school department. representing an increase of 3.68%. The next category is non-tax revenues. When you factor in the non-tax revenues with the city, you'll see that there's an increase on the city side on the non-tax revenues of 1.4 million or 9.19%. On the non-tax revenues, I will say Phil and I and Jill have talked about this a number of times and gone through the numbers. The numbers are conservative estimates on the revenues. For example, with municipal revenue sharing, we're not taking all of the funds that we believe we'll be getting. The thing is, we don't know what's going to happen with the coronavirus and how that may impact funding at the state level and in turn impact municipal revenue sharing. So we're trying to be conservative and careful in terms of how we do that. The school department, the proposed budget regarding the municipal impact is $27,934,489, or an increase of $494,313 on non-tax revenues, or 4.52%. On the tax levy, what I'm proposing is 24.5 million, almost 24.6, which represents an increase, a net increase, when you take expenses minus the non-tax revenues of $78,856, or 0.32% increase. On the school department, the increase at this point in time is $763,310, or an increase of 4.3%. And with intergovernmental, there's an increase of $336,824, or an increase of 7.64%. So the total tax levy, when you add up the city, the school department, intergovernmental services, is almost 1.2 million, or an increase in tax levy of 2.53%. When you go down, you'll see the tax rate. What that equates to is, on the city side, there would be an increase of 4 cents, or 0.31%. For the school at this point in time, the increase is 39 cents, or 4.24%, and the intergovernmental increase is 35 cents, or 16.59%, for a total of 77 cents, or 3.25% increase. Are there any questions regarding this page that people may have?
Peter?
Yes.
Manager, can you scroll up a little bit? I can't see the last line down there.
Phil, can you do that?
I think it's your screen.
Okay, thank you. I'll change it.
Okay.
Phil, you want to go to the next slide? So here's what the homeowner impact would be based on the proposed budget at this point in time. For someone in a home valued at $150,000, if you look at the city budget, that 4-cent increase would result in a $6 increase to someone living in a home at valued at $150,000. If you go across for someone living in a home valued at $200,000, the impact would be $8 more, or $2,504 would become $2,512. On intergovernmental, you can see what the breakdown is there. For someone in a home valued at $150,000, there would be an increase of $51. And for someone living in a home valued at $200,000, the increase would be $68. And then with the school budget, based on where it is at this point, the increase is $58.50 for someone in a home valued at $150,000, and $78 for someone in a home valued at $200,000. The combined is $115.50 for someone in a home valued at $150,000, and $154 for someone in home valued at $200,000. Next slide, Phil. Capital needs, I'll be presenting my proposed CIP for FY21 this Thursday evening. Here's a summary of the capital needs. It's not all inclusive by detail, but you'll see the Auburn Lewiston Airport, there's an increase of 450,000. City Clerk Office, 20,000. Economic Community Development, 845,000. Facilities, 530,000. Fire and EMS, 633,000. LATC, 50,000 for a bus. Police Department, 360,000. Public Works, 6.4 million. As you may remember, with our budget this year, because of the increase from Auburn Lewiston 911 of over $2 million in our CIP for FY20 and the previous year, we were not able to put as much funding in for Public Works this year, but we are trying to restore that funding, which we need to do. Recreation and sports facilities, the increase is 360,000 on capital needs. And then education, I'm recommending $1 million. The superintendent has requested about 1.4. And then contingency, 23,000 for a total of 9.5 million. The department directors, when they present their budgets beginning this Thursday, will get into more of the detail in terms of how this budget impacts their operating budget as well as capital needs.
Peter, could you
Next slide, Phil.
tell us how much we're retiring as well?
Yes. I'll talk about that more on Thursday, but we are retiring over $9 million FY21. Again, the city side is 8.5. When you include education, it's $1 million, so it puts it at 9.5. With what's going on with the economy, which is not obviously what we want to see nationally or worldwide, it is going to help us in terms of bonding, and we'll be following up with our bond rating companies to get some further information from them on how that will impact and potentially benefit the city. Phil, next slide.
Councilor Lasagna has a question.
And this may be addressed later, it's very general. In terms of what we're working through with the budget, how are we incorporating planning and thinking about COVID-19?
That's a good question. We have tried to do that in terms of budgeting for our revenues conservatively. On the operating side and the capital side, those budgets were pretty much determined before the coronavirus really took hold a month or so ago. So that's something that we can talk about during the budget process. I think the thing that we need to be doing is looking at trying to position ourselves for the recovery after the coronavirus. Phil and I are talking about forming a recovery team. I know the mayor is focused on that as well, as I'm sure many of you are, to look at the things that we need to be doing, put ourselves in the best position to be able to recover after the virus. Again, this is the tax levy increase, which I've spoken about before. It's 2.53%. The city is at 0.32%, school 4.30 at this point in time, intergovernmental 7.64, and that gives you 2.53%. Next slide, Phil. And then the tax rate increase, which is 77 cents at this point in time, or 3.25%. And that's the presentation at this point. Again, the department directors will be talking in more detail when they present their budgets on the operational budgets and the capital improvement budgets that they have.
Very good. Is there any questions for the city manager on his budget right now before we go into some discussion points?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Council Walker, you have a question?
Yeah, well, not a question. I have a comment that I looked through the capital, the CIP there and everything, and I personally feel that 9,500,000 is too high. So before you call all these people in, I'd like you to poll the council to see if they agree, disagree. But I think there's still room for you to get this down some. I would like to throw 500,000 out there that it needs to come down. You can play with that number, or other councilors can tell you what they think. But before they all come to the table, I'd like you to know at least how we feel. And if they disagree with me, that's fine. And if they agree with me, I think you should know now, not 2 weeks after we start listening to people.
Just a response, if I can. It's your prerogative to change the budget. We are having our presentations beginning Thursday. And if you, after listening to the presentations and having your questions answered, feel that you want to change the CIP, it's your prerogative to do that.
And it is, just for, especially for some of the newer counselors, during this process, when we have our readings on the budget and the CIP, we can make motions to amend, strike, remove, add, reappropriate to line items. So it's something that, obviously we have to look at very carefully. I will say this, if I could, Councilor Walker brings up a point though, and I'd like to turn it back on the council, as he said. We have to have goals as a group going into this budget season. Historically, or if it was under normal times, I'd say our strategic planning initiative would be the only goal or set of goals that we should probably be really focusing on, other than the bricks and mortars, if you would, of making sure the roads are plowed and kids get educated. But the city manager talked about economic recovery. It does not take a PhD in economics to know that we're in for a hit when you got 20 to 30% of the workforce unemployed. I was on a call today with the governor, and she hinted at it a little bit about economic recovery. And one of the points she said is you have to look at our major gross domestic product drivers. Those need to recover. That's how the rest of the state recovers. House construction, rehabilitation, commercial construction. So construction trades are main GDP drivers. So we have to think about this, but we also have to think about how quick we want to recover. I would assume that everybody wants to recover as quick as possible and quicker than anyone else. Is that a fair assumption to make? So, right. So that should be a driving, message out to staff, the city manager, and we should also kind of keep driving that message out to each other as we're going through this process to remember whatever we're spending money on, A, does it increase or speed up our economic recovery? B, does it hamper by spending the money or not spending the money? Does it hamper our economic recovery by putting our tax rate at a too high position where it's not beneficial to have economic recovery? Okay, or put people at an economic disadvantage. And are we also focusing our strategic planning goals around economic recovery, short and long term? So let's say economic recovery and long-term economic stability. So I'll leave it that, open this up to the council for discussion. Councilor Zanya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilor Walker that I think when people come to the table to speak with us, they need to speak in terms of just exactly what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. We need to think in terms of economic recovery. Is what they're presenting to us, does it either enhance or prevent economic recovery? And I think that there's some things that are included in this budget that do not enhance economic recovery. Not that that's what we want to talk about, but I think, again, as Councilor Walker said, have people come to the table and be ready to say to us, not, I need this because of X, but I need this is going to be important in terms of recovery. And without it, it will prevent us from having effective recovery.
Councilor Boss?
I agree. I think we have to think about it in terms, our budget in terms of recovery. This issue is not going away. It's not going away quickly. And I think that if we can also show, I'm willing to consider items too that have a return on investment that's clearly demonstrated. So there are lots of different things that I do see return on investment for, but some things that also received a cut prior or were cut as part of the manager's review as well, like a sustainability coordinator, which could pay for itself. And, you know, there could be a lot of cost savings or return on investment there. But I think that those two factors we should be really considering, both recovery and return on investment.
Councilor Gary? Councilor Gary, you're on mute.
Oh,
There we go.
thank you. I agree with Council Walker. Even if we weren't in our crisis mode, I would still say this budget's too high. But given our circumstances, we need to plan better a budget before we give final approval for anything.
I'm sorry, could you elaborate on that?
The manager and the departments have planned out their budget to try to put us in the best position possible to provide the services. Given our crisis mode, we're going to probably have to rearrange a lot of the stuff in order to fulfill our strategic plan and to make it best suited for our economic conditions as well as our physical conditions of our residents.
Someone else question? I'm sorry. If I could, on that, Councilor Gary, if I could dovetail on this, and this is maybe a request for the city manager and assistant city manager. I'd like a little bit, if we could quantify really what an increase in the mill rate means. So for example, if we're looking at this year in time, last year, taxes went up, I want to say it was like 1.25% overall from the previous year. Let's look at what the last 5-year run rate was on mill rate increases or tax levy increases for our residents and businesses in Auburn. Then let's compare it to valuation increases as well over that same 5-year period. I know over the last 2 years, valuations have increased over 12% in Auburn for homes and or real estate. So that's something to compare to. I'd like to see what our rate of growth on the tax side is over the last 5 years compared to the rate of valuation growth on the ownership side. I just think it's not going to tell us everything, but it will tell us a little bit about perspective and how taxes are flowing and what does that mean for the average investor or taxpayer, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, just a comment. The tax rate last year was less than 1%.
Thank you. I know it was lower than inflation. I couldn't quite remember what the rate was. I'm sorry, Councilor Milks, and we'll come back to Councilor Zania.
I just would like to add, I think in this economy in the environment of recovery, it's going to be very important for us as a city to show that we have economic, budgetary responsibility and that we're not overspending in a situation where there's a lot of people that are unemployed, and that we as a city have to realize that and show economic restraint, budget restraint. And I think we should try and be as close to zero budget as possible. Increase 0%.
Councilor Zania, then Councilor Carrier.
I think one of the things with this budget is that it feels to me a little bit like business as usual. I know that people are being thoughtful and that we've asked the school department and they again have been able to bring their requests down, but it's the city is running, we're doing a good job, but it's not business as usual for a lot of people out there. So I think not only considering what it means for getting, redoing our roads and things that we know are important, we also need to think about what is this going to mean to the individual person out there, this amount of money when they maybe are, as Councilor Milk said, unemployed and don't have access to this. I think we need to think about this budget differently than we've thought about budgets in the past because of that.
So for example, expenditures taking a priority that are directly used within the city of Auburn that would put or could put residents of Auburn at work, i.e. home improvement, construction, technical trades, skill sets. And then when that money's flowing through the economy, then you have your service industry, lawyers and so forth that are getting paid, accountants, et cetera. Is that what you're talking about? Direct economic gain?
I think definitely economic gain, but I also maybe we need to think about things like sports tourism, and maybe that's not going to be what we need to be focusing on in the next year. It's something that we can do a year from now. Not just, I don't mean to pick on them, but I think there are things in this budget that we need to look at and say, this can wait a year. There's not a return on investment, as Councilor Boss said, and it is going to help for people in this community to not have to pay for something like that.
Very good. Councilor Carey, then I'll get back to Councilor Boss.
Well, what I'm looking for is a prioritization. When I hear the department heads talk about this, something we made the school do the other night in the meeting, I want to see a prioritization of their wants and needs. I want to see what do we have to have, what is, safety wise, what is, down the line. I want to, so I know that if I'm going to cut something, I'm not cutting something that's going to be, a priority. I'd like to see a list of things and how they deem that they need them. And the other thing too that we think that we need to talk about is it's not only what we have right now and the fact that we have this current situation, but we look down the road for a year or two and we're going to have another substantial increase insofar as the school, and maybe looking at what we retire between now and then and what we're spending now and then, because we're saying, well, it's only this much this time. Well, it'll be this much this time, this much next time. Then the school will kick in, and then we're going to be talking about quite a bit of money at the end that, we're going to have raised the evaluation. I think we all need to think about that.
Councilor Boss?
I wanted to also say that we should be looking at places where we could cut that are not necessary or don't have a return on investment right now, but also places where we need to increase our budget. For example, the Feeding Auburn program has been utilized extensively, more than we thought, and we clearly have a greater hunger issue than we've addressed in the past. And can we put more money to helping our families get food right now? We're talking about reducing the mill rate, which is great and helpful in this crisis, and talking about businesses, but we also need to talk about families and what we can do to provide direct supports for them in this time.
I think we need to look at all that, of course. Now, so I just want to, here's a couple questions just so you can think deeper on this. And this has always been when we're looking at budgets, we always do it in 1 year snapshots. And we're assuming that certain variables aren't going to change. But we actually, year after year, realize that they do change. For example, the overall citywide valuation. We were coming into the 11th hour last year. We knew that we were going to have a greater valuation. We didn't know what that would mean for tax dollars. And it was substantial. We've talked about over the last 2 years that I've been mayor, 2.5, the fact that in order to pay for a high school, we're going to need increase in valuation, cutting the tax pie into smaller slices. That's how you can control tax growth, by having a tax base that's larger. So let's all think about that too. We're talking about ROI, not just direct ROI, but what is the secondary or tertiary ROI, and how does that affect Auburn for the long term? Because we're just a council, but what we do today could have a trickle-down effect, positive or negative, for a decade to come. Case in point, recession, massive cuts that happened. I'm not sure. I wasn't an elected official then, nor was Peter manager. But in 2009, 2010, 2011, drastic cuts were made. We are just now getting back to a steady state within the city post those cuts. That was a 9-year recovery. Now, frankly, if you look everywhere else in the country, it did not last 9 years. So we have to look at that history as an object lesson that we don't repeat. So just for us to think about, we're going to have more of these conversations. We have 5 more minutes before we'll take a break and start a regular meeting. Is there any other questions of the city manager? Just to be fair, Councilor Zanya, is there anybody else who hasn't spoken yet? Councilor McLeod, Carrier, everybody? Councilor Zanya?
Just quickly, so Mr. Manager, does it seem appropriate to ask the department heads when they present to us to frame their thinking the way we're talking about? This idea of what is going to help us in recovery and what will keep us from being able to recover quickly in terms of looking at their budget, and also what Councilor Carrier said about prioritizing.
Yes, it does. And I'll say this. I think I think the department directors have already submitted budgets that they think are beneficial for the economic growth of the city and the continued development of it. But I will speak with them about that. We have a call tomorrow and we'll discuss it. I would also say, for those of you who are new to the council, you're probably not aware of this. Our valuation in the last 5 years prior to this year had grown by 112 million. Unfortunately, because of lack of reimbursements from the state for things like the homestead program, that money has grown by 132 million. So our property valuation, even though it grew by 112 million, it was exceeded by the lack of funding from the state. That's not unique to us. That's affected many municipalities across the state of Maine. The lack of municipal revenue sharing between 2010 and 2019 was a loss in revenue of $18.3 million. So those are issues that put us where we are as a city right now. And we need to keep working on those issues. But yes, Phil and I will talk with the department directors tomorrow. And I will say, I think they have done a good job and they have prioritized their budgets. In answer to Councilor Carrier's question, when we went back to them trying to get the budget down as low as we could, we gave them a number to get to. And Phil and I said to them, you find the cuts based on your priorities and what you think makes the most sense. And they did that. That's why we're at an increase of 4 cents on the mill rate at this point in time. So we'll be ready.
And I will say that we can't delegate this duty off to city staff, probably more so than we already have and what they've already done. You can delegate duty, but you cannot delegate the responsibility. When you compound that with data, knowledge, and wisdom, that's going to lie on us to make those decisions, either for or not for any type of spending level, or to add different levels of spending. So, with that said, good starting conversation. We got a lot more of these to come. I'm going to go and enter us into a break here on the workshop. We've got 7 more minutes till our regular council meeting. Okay. Anybody have anything before we go on mute? Okay, very good then. We stand in recess.
Thank you.
Nice. Look at that fancy. Okay. Are we live, Brian? On air?
Yes, you're live.
Very good then. I'll now call to order the meeting of April 6, 2020. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
With
liberty
and
Justice for all.
for all. Probably wasn't the most harmonic rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance, but I think we got the point across. Thank you, Council. And thank you, everybody who's joining us today for the April 6th meeting. For those of you who are just joining us from home or online watching, we are going ahead with a fully remote meeting. We'll have more instructions going through. There'll be some slight differences in today's meeting. Namely, we'll have one public comment, but we will be having public comment. We'll also be doing all votes on orders and resolutions via roll call with the city clerk. So we'll start this process off with a roll call of attendance. Mrs. Clerk?
Can't hear her.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Mayor Levesque,
Here.
Councilor Carrier,
Here.
Councilor Walker,
Here.
Councilor Boss,
Here.
Councilor Gary,
Here.
Lasagna,
Here.
McLeod,
Here.
Phillips.
Here.
Thank you.
Very good then. Okay. Next, we have 3 consent items on tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Carrier. I have a second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor? Excuse me, via roll call vote. I'm going to have to get used to this too. Ms. Clerk, please call a roll call.
Councilor Carrier,
Yes.
Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Councilor Boss,
Yes.
Councilor Gary,
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna,
Yes.
Councilor McLeod,
Yes.
Councilor Milks.
Yes.
The consent items passed by a vote of 7-0. Moving along. We have the minutes of the March 16th, 2020 regular council meeting. Are there any corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the March 16th, 2020 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion from Councilor Walker, and a second from Councilor Milks. Sue, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilor Carrier,
Yes.
Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Councilor Boss,
Yes.
Councilor Boss,
Yes.
Councilor Gary,
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna,
Yes.
Councilor McLeod,
Yes.
Councilor Milks.
Yes.
Minutes passed by a vote of 7-0. Next on to communications, presentations, and recognition. First, we have a presentation by Peter Rubens on the Androscoggin River water quality classification. Councilors, I believe you've gotten some information about this. Mr. Rubens, I'd like to invite you to address the council at this time.
Do you see me?
Yes.
Let's see, that's my picture, but do you want my video? How do I get there? Just click on me?
You're fine right there, Mr. Rubens, if you want to just give us a communication.
Okay, whatever you say. All right.
Great picture, reminds me of summer.
It was. Well, I'm on the board of Grow LA, and I'm the chair of the Grow LA River Working Group. And our mission statement, as far as Grow LA River Working Group is concerned, is to be the conduit between Lewiston and Auburn for best use of the river. And we have 3 things that we're working on. One of them is the Great Falls, and one of those is to get people to come down and see the Great Falls now as it runs. for the next 2 months, it will be running. And most people don't know we have a little Niagara, our own little ice disc right here in downtown Lewiston, Auburn. So that's what we're encouraging people to do. And then we're also planning on looking at lighting of the falls and when it's running, and the granite when it's not. So there's 10 months of the year that the falls doesn't run. The other thing we did was the LA River History Tour. And as you recall, Museum in the Streets is now finished. There's 15 signs on the Auburn side and 15 signs on the Lewiston side, telling the history, the environment, the culture, all about the history of the people of Lewiston, Auburn. And right now, last Tuesday, the Grow LA River Working Group and Friends of Merrimack Bay and a number of other river organizations presented to the Department of Environmental Protection a proposal for reclassification of the river from C to B. And the Androscoggin River is a national success story. It is one of the top 10 polluted rivers in the country 50 years ago on the first day of Earth Day celebration, and remains Class C, the lowest classification of river quality. Data shows that it currently meets Class B, and reclassification to B won't allow it to slip backwards. Maine's water quality classification system is goal-based. When proposing an upgrade in classification, recommend waters that either presently attain or with reasonable application of improved treatment or best management practices could reasonably be expected to attain the standards and criteria of higher proposed class. The lower Androscoggin waters remain classified as C, Maine's lowest water quality classification. Reasons for reclassification to Class B are many. Here are a number of them. One, the image of the polluted Androscoggin River, the dirty loo, needs to end. We need to create Power Falls River Park. Bring people down to see the Great Falls when it's running and see the walking paths and all the other things that our riverfront has to offer. Protection of the gains from the $55 million spent by Lewiston and Auburn since 2010 for stormwater overflow, for fishing, fish passage, boating, recreation, canoeing, kayaking, the dressers rips, camping, Power Falls LA festivals, Great Falls lighting, feel the power when the falls are running. New economic opportunities, Museum in the Streets, Riverwalk, Museum LA. Androscoggin Land Trust and Friends of Merrimack Bay are managing thousands of acres along this area of the river. The DEP electronic sound readings for 3 months in August, which is the lowest time of flow during the river, was set up this past summer. And during that period, the flow never fell below 7 parts per million, which is the minimum for the Gulf Island Dam, the Great Falls, and the Durham Boat Launch to remain B. Consistency. Lower sections of both the Penobscot and the Kennebec River are both classified Class B right now. We ask you that you be a signatory to our proposal that the Maine Department of Environmental Protection recommend to the Environment and Natural Resources Committee that the current data for the waters from Gulf Island Dam down to Merrimack Bay be targeted to meet Class B and monitored yearly by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, with the industries that are required to collect data to maintain B, providing the funds required. Legislation should not be required to accomplish this, but should our proposal not be adopted, we expect to return to ask your support for clarifying legislation directing reclassification. Senator Muskie used the Androscoggin as his poster child for Clean Water Act in 1972. Years later, it remains the poor stepchild of all Maine's large rivers when it comes to cleanup efforts. The board has an opportunity to change this, and we ask you for your support. The Androscoggin's time has come. That's it.
Well, very good. Thank you. Peter, do we have anybody from staff to talk about this from staff perspective before we open up to council questions?
Staff of?
I'm sorry, Auburn staff?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, Eric Cousins has been involved with this, if he's online here.
If Eric is online, Eric can certainly speak to it.
May I
Eric has
also-
been
Hello, Mayor.
under the
It's
weather
Mike
lately. So I don't know if he is
He's
participating.
on. He's on.
He's here.
Hey, Eric,
Hello.
go for it.
I've worked closely with Peter in talking through this. It was scheduled for an earlier workshop. As Peter said, the cities of Lewiston and Auburn have spent a lot of money over the years in improving our stormwater and sewer separation, catch basin cleaning practices, and we've certainly been a part of improving the water quality of the river. There's also been a reduction in discharges upstream over that period. And I think all of those together play a part in improving the water quality of the river. Not upgrading the classification, I think, comes with the risk that other polluters besides Lewiston and Auburn, who have done a lot to clean up their discharges, other industries upriver and in the Little Androscoggin watershed could be able to increase their discharges to the river and still stay within a Class C classification. So I think that's the risk on the environmental side, is that somebody would use up some of the gains that we've fought so hard to contribute to. On the other side of it, a higher classification may come with more restrictions on what can be discharged to the river over time. So there could be a cost to municipalities or industry on the other side of it. I think it's there. If you talk to different people, you'll get different opinions on that, but not supporting it and not seeing it upgraded does come with the risk of losing some of the ground that we've gained to other people or other industries.
So this is a policy decision, council, that has to be made. And I'm sorry, Peter Rubens, I do apologize for this taking obviously long, probably past your initial deadline to come before us, but things were happening. I know the Conservation Commission has spoken about this or talked about this internally and with you, Peter. They did not give a written response, did they?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I think they needed to get the council's approval.
Okay, very good then. Council, we have to bring this up if we're going to take any action on this in the form of an order or a resolution. Mr. Creighton, we're obviously not prepared to do that right now, though I do think we have a draft of this. Is that correct?
Yes, we can.
I'm sorry.
We can do that for the next meeting if the council would like to.
No, we'll turn this back to the council. Council, obviously we can ask some more questions, but are you right now inclined to have this come forth as an agenda item during your next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, very good then. So let's get that on the next meeting. Now let's ask some questions of Peter if we have him here. I think, and Eric as well. Is there, council, do you have any questions, clarifying questions?
I'm going to be on here for a minute.
Okay. Councilor Lasagna.
When we talk about unintended consequences with businesses that this may be restrictive to them, what's an example of that?
You have to be very quiet.
Is this to me or to Eric?
But by Eric, I would assume.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed the question. I had a toddler climbing onto my lap.
No, that's
Fair
okay.
enough.
And Eric, I appreciate you being here. I know that you haven't been feeling well and you're got a lot of childcare that you're doing. I was just, in terms of unintended consequences, I know you don't know the specifics, but the downside of this upgrade would be that some businesses would be restricted, further restricted in terms of what they can put into the river. Who would that be?
Could be paper industry upstream. The cities of Lewiston and Auburn probably, if it's changed to Class B, would not be able to go back to discharging what they've discharged in the past. We've already been successful in reducing that substantially. If you look at the data from the Lewiston and Auburn Stormwater Group. So it's just, I think it's all around holding the status quo more so than reducing what's allowed to be discharged to the river.
Okay, so the cities are fine. Is there any pushback from the mills upriver?
I would guess that they would generally be opposed to any potential further restrictions for discharges, although they're not discharging anywhere near what they are permitted to discharge currently.
Okay, thank you.
May I make a comment on that? Do you hear me?
Yes, Peter.
The question about the paper mills basically is the fact that they are only using about 40 to 50% of their licensed amount right now. And they've been doing that for years. So the license is a large buffer for them. And up to now, they haven't expanded on that. So I guess there's concern now that one of the companies is a Chinese company and the other has just gone through a takeover. And if they have been meeting this B standard for the past 10 years, we're not ready to allow them to go backwards. I mean, that's a statute in the Clean Water Act, is if it's met a certain standard that you can't allow it to go back. So that's, I think, where we stand. We don't expect this to cause any job loss, basically, at any of the paper companies, and that's not our intention.
Thank you. That's great.
Councilor Boss, you had something?
Yeah, I was just going to make the same point that Peter Rubens just made, which was that we see that over the last 10 years, the dissolved oxygen levels are already putting us at higher than B classification already. So the chance that we would have a sharp increase in pollutants in the water is A, unlikely, and B, probably unwelcome. So I don't see that it would be a difficulty for us to move it to B. And I think that Councilor McLeod also had his hand up too. I didn't mean to jump in front of him.
I didn't see Councilor McLeod.
No, that's all right. I didn't have my hand up that high. So I had two questions. One of which is, would that mean that we would not be able to continue to discharge what we're discharging now as we're cleaning it up, or would that be a progressive process?
The discharges haven't changed at all. Discharges at the paper companies haven't changed at all. Discharges at the water treatment plant in Lewiston, Auburn, for both Lewiston and Auburn, hasn't changed at all. Dale Doty did speak at the Lewiston council meeting when I spoke with them, and he said he's been in favor of this for years. He says the only consequence that he thinks he may see is that maybe the Environmental Protection Agency may ask him to go a little faster in some of the stormwater overflow that they still have left. I believe Auburn has met 99 and 9/10% of theirs, and I think Lewiston is close to 90% of theirs. So that's what I understand from Dale Doty.
Let me ask a hard political question. Who gains by keeping us at a C?
I'm not sure. We don't understand why it remains at a C. The Maine Department of Environment
numerous times in the past, correct, Peter?
Correct. I didn't hear you. Said again, please.
This has been rejected, or reclassification efforts, several times in the past.
Yes.
At least recent memory that I remember.
Rejected by whom?
By the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And the reason that this is they use modeling on the river. So when they do modeling, they've explained this to us completely. Most people think that the Maine Department of Environmental Protection sets the standards. They do not set the standards. The Maine legislature sets the standards on all the rivers. So the Maine Department of Environmental Protection uses modeling on the river. And on just an example, let me say that the two paper mills are allowed to spill 100,000 gallons a week of a pollutant. And now they're only spilling 50,000. The Maine Department of Environmental Protection has to set their model at the maximum load in what they call 7Q10, which is basically over a 10-year period, over 7 days over a 10-year period, where the water level in the DO is below where it should be. And all the data that has been collected by the Friends of Merrymeeting Bay over the past 20 years, under the auspices of the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, shows that it's met Class B 99% of the time. So that's why we are goal-oriented, basically. The Clean Water Act is goal-oriented and don't want it to slip backwards.
So someone is gaining something. And I would challenge Peter, if you could, and I'll definitely be talking to our delegation, our local legislative delegation, about this.
Yep.
But what does it mean to the state DEP or another governing organization when we do get reclassified, if we did get reclassified to a B level, what type of federal or state appropriations would they not get?
I don't know that they wouldn't get any approach. I
Well,
don't.
that's, I think, if you stem this back to looking at data, you look at modeling, and you look at, just a little bit of history here. What does it mean to a municipality? For example, we don't have any mountain lions in Maine,
Right.
because Maine gets money every year from the Federal Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to study mountain lion loss of habitat. That goes away if we had mountain lions.
Right.
A great example, I think, or analogy at this point. What happens to funding mechanisms and sources if our river is reclassified? I think there's an answer there. It's speculation, but if we could dig a little bit deeper into that, and I'll ask our legislative delegation as well. But in the meantime, I think we can bring this up to council resolution on our next meeting.
Okay.
Councilor Walker?
Does this include the Little Androscoggin that runs down through South Auburn or New Auburn?
No, the Little Androscoggin is totally something separate, but it's being addressed also. But this is a separate reclassification at this time.
Thank you.
Very good, Mr. Rubens. I really appreciate your time, and really, frankly, not just your time here, but all your efforts over the years to really, and it's working. It's good. It doesn't go unnoticed to make the Androscoggin River a focal point for a lot of different areas.
Right. And now that the falls is running, I hope everybody will bring their family down, but keep 12 feet apart and go down and see it. And you can feel the power.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right.
Rubens.
Oh, one last thing is that the Maine Department of Environmental Protection has given us to the end of April to get in a letter of recommendation because of what's going on now. So we have 3 weeks basically that's possible to look at it at that period of time.
You'll get an answer after on April 28th.
Right. Hey.
Okay. That's just our next regularly scheduled council meeting.
Great.
So that's when we'll
Thank
have
you all. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Peter. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to communications. Second, we have Everett Little High School site phasing and building schedule presentation. Mark Lee and Lisa Swain. Kelsey, if we could bring them into the conversation, please.
Hello.
I don't see Lisa listed as an attendee. Is she only on the phone? There's one phone listener.
Lisa is not with us tonight. Just Mark Lee attending from Harriman.
Hi, Mark. Welcome. Thank you for driving all this way to Auburn City Hall tonight to give a presentation. We appreciate it.
Glad to be with all of you tonight.
Okay, we'll turn the floor over to you, Mark.
Very good. I don't know if the graphics are on your end for this, or there we are. Excellent. Thank you very much. This was part of a presentation that we shared with the building committee last week, and we thought it had some good, solid information to provide an update to the city council. The graphic before you identifies the site of the current Everett Little High School and identifies a number of important pieces of information about the proposed project. Recently, we've had a shift in the location of the building. You can see underneath the Roman numeral 3, there's a green outline, and that indicates the existing high school footprint. And so that shows the 3 itself is on top of the area near the gymnasium and the technical education wing of the building. And the outline in blue below the Roman numeral 1 was the original proposed location of the building. We have shifted due to some soil constraints. We have shifted and rotated the building to the brown outline, solid outline that you see just to the right of the Roman numeral 1 and 3. That is the area currently occupied by a practice field, and it snugs up really closely to the building, but it allows us to construct the building in a way that separates it, the construction from the existing work in the school itself in terms of the educational activities. The red line that runs through the site is the proposed barrier between the construction side of the site and the school functions of the site itself. And so during the first phase, which if everything goes according to plan, that first phase begins in the spring of next year, of 2021, and really gets going in earnest as school gets out in late spring, summer of 2021. And that will separate the two different sides of the site for 2 years. And so what it will allow is it will allow the school access from Harris on the upper side of the site plan. And so that will come down. The parking will be maintained in the front of the school as it does now. And the construction activity will come off of Western Ave and across Auburn Heights. And so that will be our construction access where the cursor is showing right now. That will come in that large area where the parking lot will eventually go, right where the Roman numeral 1 is. That will be the staging area for the contractors' activities. And so that will allow them to work with entirely separate access to the site and a secured area that allows construction to go on with at the same time that the school is occupied. It also allows the area of the track to stay open, with the exception that we think there may be some possible area right at the corner of it, but we're working through that to see if we can maintain access to the track and field inside of it until such time as we move to the second phase of the project. So again, the construction of the school begins in the spring of 2021 and is anticipated to take 24 months or so to complete. And so it would complete in the summer of 2023, at which time, at the completion of that, we will shift the fence along the blue line. So the red will primarily be in place, with the exception of we're going to take over a portion right there where the cursor is now underneath the Roman numeral 3. That area in the summer of 2023 will be converted to a parking lot on the side of the school. And starting the fall of 2023, the sides will flip and access to the site will occur off of Western Avenue. We will have the full complement of parking in front of the building and to the side of the building, and access around the building as well. What we will then do is construction will flip to the Harris Street side, and we will commence with construction of the ball fields and associated roadways and parking improvements on that side of the site. And so the designation of the two is simply the first part of that, where we have to remove a knoll of ledge at that edge of the site. And that's above the current parking area, but that will eventually become the outfield of the baseball field and the infield of the softball field, as they're shown there. But that ledge will also be used to fill in portions of the site, so we're balancing our cut and fills. And so then the final part of the construction itself will be in the area of the fields shown with the Roman numeral 4. So that construction of the fields themselves on the other side, when we flip over the side in the fall of 2023, we anticipate that the fields will take about 12 months to construct. And so they will come online in the summer of 2024. And so that at that time, both sides of the site are opened up, and we have the full complement of fields and the high school open to the public. And so that in a graphic sense illustrates the current thinking behind the logic of how we sequence the construction of the site itself. Are there any questions on that? All right.
Mark?
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention that the one thing that is being sacrificed here that was not in the, with the initial orientation is student parking.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Lasagna. One of the things that we were looking at, and not sure that we even had gotten to the point of understanding the impact of the construction activities in the original layout, but there is a significant impact. So that there's a fair number of parking spaces currently in the area near the tennis courts of the existing site, and exactly that near where the cursor is shown right there. Those will be taken offline during the construction itself, and right now the school administration is looking at possibilities for how we can temporarily support the parking to the site. And so I know that the superintendent and the principals are working carefully to look at potential options. And so I know that there's been some correspondence going on that, but before we had this site plan, we simply didn't know what the impact would be. And so now we are looking through those areas and how to accommodate them. It may include strategies such as parking at a remote location and offering shuttle service, or looking to increase the number of students that are using the bus.
And that class, would it be 2 academic years?
That would be for 2 academic years, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Carrier.
You said you have to do some work above it as far as ledge is concerned. In the new location of the school, is there any ledge that we will be having to worry about?
Councilor Carrier, there's no ledge in the area of the footprint of the school building itself. Simply, there is some on the site. The majority, again, of what we're looking at is in the area bounded by the green outline near the Roman numeral 2.
And I also noticed that we're sort of snugging up to the abutting property owners. And I'm not really seeing, I have poor eyesight anyway, but I'm looking at the elevation. Are we going to be causing drainage issues for the abutting property owners on the backside?
Yeah, the questions regarding the distance to the abutting properties and drainage are items that we're actually now just starting to dig into the how to mitigate those areas as we go through the planning with the Auburn Planning Department. So one of the nice things is that the City of Auburn is doing the full stormwater as well as a standard complement of planning review. And so we'll be looking carefully at things such as where runoff. The permitting does not allow us to increase the quantity of or flow of stormwater from what exists currently on the site. And so we're being very, very careful to look at that. Most of the stormwater is captured and treated in the area of the parking lot, which is identified with the Roman numeral 1. So that's the majority of it's going to be a chamber system underground that actually filters the stormwater. And so the majority of it is there. And we haven't looked yet in terms of, we accommodate the required setbacks from the adjacent property owners, but we are looking carefully at how to mitigate any adverse impacts by the placement of the building.
Okay, is there any other questions? Mr. Lee, I do have 2. During the initial
Yes, Mr.
planning of
Mayor.
the high school, much thought and discussion went into solar gain and the design of the building itself based upon the location of the building relative to the sun. How is that affecting the design now?
Sure.
This is what, about a 90-degree switch rotation?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at the impact that it's having on the solar gain on the building itself. We've updated our energy models, and there's not a tremendous appreciable difference from the orientation with regard to the southern exposure and the envelope of the building itself. We did have to rotate some of our solar shades on windows to cut down on solar gains on the glazing of the building itself. And we're also making sure that the roof areas are available to accommodate solar voltaic in the future as well. So that's those are areas we're looking at being able to provide certainly the real estate for solar panels. And the building itself is an extremely efficient building off of a geothermal heating cooling system.
Could you also, do you have now, or can you put together that the outside view specifically from the bottom of Union Street bypass, Minot Avenue?
Yeah,
we'd like to know how that's going to look in relation to the rest of the city.
Absolutely. No, that's something we're going to look at carefully. One of the things that we actually discovered with this shift in the building is that there's a view from one of the large common spaces in the building itself as you first walk into the building that actually we believe is going to provide a view across the lower portion of Auburn towards the river and onto the Lewiston skyline. So we think there's going to be kind of a magnificent view from internally. But it's an excellent point. We're going to look externally to see what it looks like from Minot Ave up to the building itself.
Can you adjust the shading to block the view of Lewiston? Is that possible?
we can put a mirror.
No, thank you very much for that, Mark. I appreciate it.
No problem, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Mark Lee at this point?
Mayor, I've got a comment. Mark, could you expand on the local authority that we have regarding the DEP? Not every municipality has that.
Absolutely, Peter. The state Department of Environmental Protection has a few communities in which they allow a delegated review up to a certain threshold of area, and so in our conversations right now with DEP, we discussed the idea that we're in the ballpark of what that threshold is to allow the city to do that review. What's wonderful about it is that it streamlines the review process from our perspective. We have one agency that we're dealing with, and the other great thing. So that's one great advantage to it. And so it just makes our life that much easier, makes the process go a lot smoother. And they were more than happy with their current workload to shift a little bit to Auburn. So it was a win-win on both sides, and we were very, very happy. So we thank Auburn for being able to undertake that.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the update. We'll let you get back to. I know you have a long commute back to your home. So.
Absolutely. We wish you well, and we'll continue to provide you some updates as we move closer and closer to the start of construction. Thank you very much.
And feel free to trickle those views to both looking in and looking out to Peter or Phil, so they can get it out to the rest of us to look at as well.
It's worth reviewing. I think when it gets sent out, it's worth reviewing to get a really good sense of the school.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
We're going to move on to the next communication piece. I'd like to bring on the Assistant City Manager, Phil Kroll, and Deputy Fire Chief Matt Fiffield to present on our COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We thought it'd be important, City Manager had requested that we give you and the community certainly an update on where we are currently with COVID-19 as it's been impacting our local community and our response. What I would like to do is I'm also going to have Michael Chamings on as well with some changes that have come regarding CDBG and funding that's coming in with that. So I'll have him share that as well. When we start with providing you in the public just what we've done as far as a resource for the community. On our website, and I have it up now so you could see it, is to me, I think, a great document that has been put together with the assistance of Rosemary Mosier, who's our GIS coordinator, and Liz Allen, who's our communications manager. What we've been able to do is really keep the community up to date on every item that we've brought forward, every message that's come in. So it's been a straight feed to the community as decisions have been made regarding our response to the coronavirus. One thing that's been added to this that I wanted to make sure that you see is this tab, which is open for business. You click on this tab, what we've been able to do, and Rosemary worked on this today, is as we want to make sure we're promoting our local businesses, those that are open, we're going to push this out first thing in the morning to have businesses submit their business status. And then someone will be able to go in, our citizens will be able to go in and actually say, what's the view of Auburn's businesses currently? So that they'll know what's open, what's available, and how they can reach them and contact them. We think this is important in many ways, as we have a lot of businesses that have started to change how they are responding in the community, as far as providing curbside services, or even changing how they deliver their resources or their services to the community. So this is just one way that we are doing that. I think this is important for the community to be able to see, and it's a good way for us to demonstrate our ability to connect with our business partners and promote them. We also have on our website the food resources. It's already been mentioned during the workshop regarding our grab-to-go meal service that the rec department has been running, with a great deal of support from citizens that have volunteered and been part of this. This has been a great program. The pickup is on Tuesdays and Fridays. They're pushing out anywhere between 150 to 200 plus meals on those Tuesdays and Fridays. Mondays and Thursdays, staff are spending a great amount of time putting these meals together. We are constantly evaluating this program and seeing how we might need to change our response as supplies and volunteers and what we have available. But it's been a great response from the community as well. We are Sabrina Best, who's our rec director, who's been really overseeing this initiative. She is going to be pushing to those who have been receiving food through this program to talk about what we might need to change and what might be able to help them. We certainly don't want any of our supplies going to waste, and so we want to make sure we get a good response and a good feedback regarding the efforts that are underway. Also on that page was the school lunch pickups that are also available, where they're located and how to access them. So as you can see, one of our major focuses has been regarding our public-facing response and how we ensure that the public is up to date. I think as a council, mayor and council, you took immediate action when it came time for the loan program that was available, and getting those funds out to those local businesses until those state and federal dollars became available was critical. The development of this hub has been beneficial. One thing that's also on here that I think is helpful for people to realize is that we have also set this program up so that we are ensuring that we're reaching many of our new Mainers in our community. So we have COVID-19 fact sheets and a small video that was done through efforts within the city of Lewiston and their partners. And so this is made available in multiple languages and available for push out to the community. We also put on here the current statistics from Maine Cdc on where we're at. So you can look at here at any time. You'll see that Maine is nearly at 500 confirmed. We have 292 hospitalized. We have 158 in the state that are recovered from COVID, and 10, unfortunately, we have 10 deaths that have occurred within the state of Maine. And we're also able to provide what's happening in Androscoggin County. So we know that in Androscoggin County, we have 23 confirmed cases and 7 hospitalized. So being able to access this and then also look at the global coronavirus cases from the Johns Hopkins University is also beneficial. we've been getting a lot of great feedback regarding this, that it's been a good resource. We're really encouraging people to use 211 for the state as far as being able to access what our current resources there, and it's just all good resources for the community to be aware of. Another piece that we've been working with as far as staff is developing, as these orders, as you all know, Council, you've been receiving the updates regularly, but some of these changes with the governor's state of emergency, some of those changes were happening and those orders were happening very rapidly. One thing that we've been doing as a staff is preparing for what is coming out and then also what we're anticipating. So starting back at March 13th, I believe was when our emergency management team got on board. Quickly thereafter, Peter initiated our COOP, which is a continuation of operation plan for our community. We've been able to meet regularly. We're meeting 2 times a week as an emergency response team and trying to ensure that we're staying ahead of this moving forward. What I would ask is for Matt to chime in. As you know, we want one of the largest parts of what we do as a community and as a local government is we provide services, which means we have a great deal of personnel. And so managing the personnel as far as how do we continue operations within the city has been vital. Matt, who is our deputy fire chief, he also serves as our safety coordinator for these types of events. Auburn has been very fortunate over the years to have done a great deal of planning. We were fortunate to have a former deputy fire chief, which was Ray Lucier, that was on staff for many years with us. He's now with Central Maine Medical Center. But when he was with us prior to his retirement and even after his retirement, he stayed on with us part-time. He was really able to help get our plan developed, get our supplies, and get our resources where they needed to be. So Auburn has really been in a great position in this response. Matt has done an outstanding job of, as safety coordinator, connecting with our outside partners like the hospitals, and also working with each one of our department managers to ensure we have a great response to our staff who are out on the front lines delivering services around the clock. So Matt, go ahead and if you can provide an update.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Levesque. I'll go over some of the numbers that Phil just went over and just give a little more details with some of those. Currently in the state of Maine, 499 cases confirmed or presumed cases of COVID-19. Very exciting news that we have 158 people who have recovered. Unfortunately, 10 deaths have been recorded as a result of COVID-19. More locally in our county here, Androscoggin County, we have 23 confirmed cases. The CDC uses a threshold of 10 cases in a particular county as their heightened awareness to start reviewing the data for a particular county for confirmation of community spread. So at this time, we don't qualify as a county with community spread, but they're currently evaluating our county for that, solely on that number. As you may have seen quickly in the slides, currently in the United States, we're approaching 350,000 cases, 18,000 recovered, and 10,000 deaths. As Phil stated, we back in early March, we activated per request the continuity of operations plan that was developed and then redeveloped more particular to this event. We're currently utilizing our incident command structure with planning documentation submitted twice a week from our directors and different division managers, always trying to stay one step ahead of any potential developments. Obviously, our staff is very busy, but we've also been attending weekly meeting conferences, video conference meetings with our emergency management team, our directors, Maine Cdc, Maine EMS, Central Maine Healthcare, and our local county EMA. We're also working weekly to work cooperation with the city of Lewiston and their emergency management director and their city safety staff, as well as Central Maine Healthcare. More particularly with our public safety, I'll give you a quick update. They're seeing call volume is at or below normal. We do not expect, looking at trends, for that to stay that way for much longer. Why they've been dealing with this, we've been doing a lot of training with them, reviewing policies, developing policies for exposures and contacts, incidents that they may potentially have. I'm happy to report that all of our public safety divisions, our 911 center, our police department, our fire department, and our public works to date are conducting medical screening with all of our employees at the beginning, at the end of their shift. It also includes for anybody on extended shift through the middle of the shift. This is an effort to make sure that we have a good handle on our public safety staff, and should we have any potential concerns there, that we can get on top of that early before it affects our total staff. Our staff's also been working fairly hard with the acquisition of PPE and decontamination supplies. And I'm happy to report that we still have a robust supply, and we're confident that we'll have enough supply through this whole pandemic. And that goes same for all of our decontamination supplies. Again, we're monitoring the staff daily. We're utilizing the city sick leave dashboard that was developed by our IT department. And currently don't have any widespread changes to report on that. Lastly, I just want to speak a little bit about some of the trending and modeling. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of my time looking at projections and information and data from multiple sources, and some of the reliable sources are lending me to believe that while we're still seeing low call volume numbers around our area now, that in about 12 to 14 days, we're going to hit the peak for our area, and that's for the entire state of Maine. And I will say that I believe, from what I see, that we're going to have some difficult times, but I can say that our staff has been training and preparing as we have through this duration, and I feel confident in our response. So I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Matt. Michael, do you want to just chime in regarding the update that you have regarding funding that's coming through CDBG?
Sure. As you know, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, Senator Collins' office last week announced a little over $16 million. The city of Auburn scheduled to receive $334,985. We did confirm that through HUD. So that process has started. We do not know when they are going to send the money out to us, and we expect more guidelines. I sent a memo out today to the city manager late this afternoon that hopefully will get forwarded to the council. So basically, this is going to be part of our CDBG program, and currently we do not know if it's going to be a substantial change to our current program, have its own process next year's, or a hybrid. There are some guidelines on it. We can't use duplication of benefits. The care funds must be used for COVID-19, and a lot of the regulations stay in place, meaning at least 70% of these funds must benefit low moderate income households or pursuing benefits. So the staff has been meeting, talking daily with HUD. We've added internal staff. We're going to be summarizing this process and going next week, probably meeting with the Community Development Advisory Committee and have the process go forward like it would any other CDBG funds for compliance, and then to the council. Big difference being is they're allowing the comment period to go from 30 days to 5 days. So that's going to help us with our current process, and that's going to help us with these new programs. So we have now a quick guide to CDBG eligible activities, and we also have the 22-page guideline that's law, and they'll be providing us more information in the near future. We will be sending a summary to the city manager, hopefully going out to the council also on some of these activities and looking for input.
Thank you, Michael. So as you can see, I believe that you'll see that the staff has been responding well. I think our community has been well informed as we move forward. I would just add, Deputy Chief Byfield had talked about the staffing. So we have 240 plus employees that we're monitoring, ensuring that they're staying safe in every way we can. We also are trying to comply with the governor's order of stay at home. And so we've been able to push out a great deal of our staff here at Auburn Hall, even though they're not here present in the building, they are working from home. We've been able to set them up at home. The majority of those that are at home are able to still work, and they check our phones. So our phones in the City Hall building are on a automated system at this point with a message that staff is off site, but will be returning your call as soon as possible. So the staff are returning those calls regularly and ensuring that we're getting information back. So, one thing that we're hearing from economic development is even though we're in the middle of this pandemic, their office is still very busy. They're still getting a lot of building permits. They still have some of their regular checks that are coming in that they need to ensure that they're staying on top of. So Michael's team is out in force doing those. And Matt had mentioned about our call volume. Even though our call volume is down, it's kind of a shift with the types of calls. And sometimes when you have that shift of the type of calls that you're responding to, becomes a challenge. Obviously, we have a lot of people that are concerned when they drive by and maybe see a business that might be open, what they might be doing, or if they're driving by a group of young people that might be gathering. So those calls are coming in. So PD is responding and taking appropriate steps to ensure that we are encouraging our public to follow the governor's guidelines as far as the stay-at-home order. Just regarding the staffing, when we were able to see, we did develop a model so that at any given day, we can actually go on and take a look at exactly where our staff is located, what's the percentage of our staff that's actually working at home, the percentage that is on a new alternate schedule. We are working on some departments that will be staggered shifts. That'll be our next phase moving in because there's still a great deal of work that needs to be done. And so we'll be staggering some shifts so that we have people coming in at different times. So that way we're reducing the amount of potential contamination or spread rather of the coronavirus. I don't know, City Manager, did you have anything you want to add to the update?
Phil, I think you did a great job. Matt and also Michael, as the counselors and the mayor can see, and the community staff's very busy doing a great job.
Any questions, Councilor Walker?
Yeah, Matt, when you say 14 more days, is that the peak or what do you think it is?
Yeah, and that fluctuates a little bit every day, but my best guesstimate from the data I can see is about a 12 to 14 days when we peak. And that's when it's the largest amount of stress on our healthcare system at all levels and for the potential of loss of life.
Thank you, Matt.
Councilor Lasagna?
Mr. Chammings, I was reading the list of how the funds can be used. Councilor Boss had mentioned bringing more funds to addressing food insecurity in the community, especially in the short term. Is this something that funds can be used for?
Yeah, they just updated some of the guidelines because these funds were originally intended for more natural disaster type, being dam replacement and tree replacement and nothing of this type. So we're probably going to get an update by the end of the week, but that is certainly an area that we are going to look at because we can do food pantry type reimbursements and restocking and also set up facilities like that. If you have enough money, you can actually build a facility for some of these things, but obviously we have $334,000. It sounds like a lot, but when you start splitting them among programs in a city our size, we're trying to utilize it the best we can.
We've just seen how effective our the emergency food system that the city has put in place. And I really hope we can continue to support that.
One thing that I failed to mention is that Peter had assigned Derek Belanger, who is our property facilities and purchasing agent, to be our liaison with FEMA as far as reimbursements. And so he has been probably spending most of his days on webinars, paying attention to what's coming out, how we can respond, because even the money that the council appropriated day one of your response to this, which was reappropriating the $10,000 6,000 of that went to the grab and go food program, and it does look like we will be able to get reimbursed on those dollars moving forward. So we are tracking that, and we're working towards that. Council Walker had forwarded to me information that he got through Age Friendly group that had sent out. Here's some grants that are currently available as a result of COVID-19. Because we have changed our programming, what we have available for staff, we've assigned some of these responsibilities to other staff. Mark Goslin has been able to write, I think, 3 of those grants that Councilor Walker had provided. We got word today that we did receive one of the grants. A lot of these grants are very small. They're $500 or $1,000, but we're applying for them because that's going to go a long way when we start continue to provide this sustainability of this program. So those are being applied for, and staff's working on that. Councilor Boss.
I also was looking at the list of ways that we can use the CARES money, and I was thinking that if the best prevention or the best protection is for folks to stay at home, then we should really prioritize rent and mortgage assistance, and so that we can ensure that people have a place where they can be safely isolated.
And if again, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt because this is communication, and we shouldn't be talking about policy decisions and how to expend money. I would recommend, though, it's great. I don't want to diminish anyone's idea or thought process here, but we do need to see what the city manager and staff come up with, and then let them present that through normal channels. This is CDBG. It should go through the CAC and the CDBG, the CAC process, and then come back to us a relatively short period of time. At that point, we can debate the merits of each program.
So the CAC will be meeting soon to look at this?
I'll be addressing committees and when they're
Okay.
meeting during my portion of communications.
Okay, thank you.
As the mayor said, and we've been responding quickly, one thing that the mayor was communicating with us about over the weekend was regarding the most recent change from the governor regarding hotels and lodging. And so we were able to also assign a staff member today to contact. We have a lot of people who are homeless that live in motels. We have that have immediate needs. So we've been able to check in with those motels to ensure that our vulnerable population that's staying there, they do meet that threshold that the governor had set regarding our homeless community, and they're able to continue staying in those establishments. So that, through the mayor's encouragement, we were able to get that going and just confirm that. So that's one more component of this constantly changing and evolving situation we're dealing with. All right, Mayor, I think that's it.
Yeah, I'll segue in to council communications at this point, starting off with myself. And I'll talk about COVID-19, and then which is pretty much everything on our plate, right? As Phil and Deputy Chief Fifield talked about earlier, and Peter and so forth, and Michael, the last 2 weeks has been really evenly split between being reactive and proactive with dealing with COVID-19 and kind of the ever-changing landscapes. A lot of calls, a lot of meetings. They have picked up with intensity since the city issued a proclamation of emergency to correspond to the governors. Today, I had a call with the governor, as well as some other mayors from throughout Maine. It was a good call. We talked on a wide variety of topics, from financial support to municipalities to the upcoming elections in June and what does that look like. Nothing was solved. We have a pretty good indication of what might be coming down. We need to prepare for that internally. I will say that was a large talking point that I had today, which was communicating out to local leaders before announcements are made. That 2 to 4 hour window of opportunity is critical for municipalities to react and prepare appropriately. I can't tell you how much time we've spent trying to understand or maybe guess what the governor is going to come up with it on a given day, and then react to it before it happens. Because once it happens, the phones and emails explode, and we have to have some tight answers. So I do think that she heard that. I think she understood that. I think now that we're getting into a somewhat more of a steady state, that communication could evolve between the local levels and her office. So looking forward to that. A lot of the conversations that we've had internally here, City of Auburn, that I've been part of, along with a lot of local businesses, has been geared towards economic recovery. This is going to be either a long recovery, abnormally long, or it could be abnormally quick. And it really is dependent upon what our actions are as a council and as staff. So when we have these conversations about our budget, additional CDBG money as an example, and stimulus money coming down through the CARES Act to local municipalities, we have to look at what's going to have the biggest impact, and not just for Auburn, but the entire region. I sent a letter today. Thank you, staff, and especially Liz Allen for helping me draft it and make it sound nice. To the governor, it was delivered today as well. I'll send you all a copy. Asking the governor to contact municipal leaders, mayors from around the state, and have them and involve mayors to the planning and distribution of federal funds to local municipalities. At the federal level, these monies are distributed based upon population, but they're only distributed directly to municipalities with populations in excess of 500,000. All municipalities with populations less than 500,000, which is everyone in Maine, first goes through the governor's office and may or may not go through the legislature, not sure yet, and then distributed down on some sort of formula that may be consistent with federal, may not be. So I think by looking at our service center or opportunity center hubs throughout the state, including those mayors as part of the conversation, part of the decision-making process, we should get those monies to us quickly and where we can do the most positive impact, not just for Auburn and not just for Lewiston, but the entire Androscoggin County region. So that's been a big focus. I do want to draw attention to the emergency proclamation jointly submitted by the city manager and myself last week. Whereas it was light on additional orders, we believe the governor and her set of orders, and executive orders rather, dealt with a good deal of issues. We added some clarification with regards to landlord and tenant mutual rights and responsibilities. We want to make sure that tenants also have the responsibility to open communication lines with landlords. Most of our landlords are small mom and pop landlords. They are small businesses. The margins in which are extremely small. Usually it's a long-term investment to set themselves up for retirement or to provide profitability during retirement. These small business owners deserve to have that communication from tenants. So we're asking all tenants within 5 days of rent being due to notify either via mail or email your landlord explaining when you lost work, when have you applied for any type of assistance, i.e. unemployment, when you expect your first check, and when can the landlord start expecting to receive either partial or full payments for back rent. This communication line is going to be essential for small business owners who own apartment buildings to go to their banks, ask for a recourse or measure to push off mortgage payments, and proper accounting and accountability. Also reinforcing the other aspects of a lease outside of non-payment of rent that are fully enforceable. This is not a blank slate for any tenant to breach quiet enjoyment, for example, of a building during this time for no fear of eviction. There is an equal responsibility that lies at everybody's feet, and it's everybody's responsibility to work together and communicate. So I just want the city and councilors, if you have it, to spend a little bit more time focusing on that part of our proclamation. Councilor Zani, did you have a hand?
I just want to push back a little bit on this 5-day people have to get to. There may be people who don't know about when they're going to get their next check, and there may be people who are not native English speakers or who don't have internet. You may send.
The 5 days have been set. I appreciate that, but you do have to have a time, and during executive orders and during the time period, we have made it. The point is, the message is, just like a lot of the executive orders from the governor, it sends a message of awareness. This should send a message of awareness.
But I also think Councilor Boss talked about ensuring that people have safe homes that they can safely sequester in if they need to. So I just want to make sure that we're thoughtful and that this is not so hard and fast that it is injurious to community members.
No, it's not, but you have to remember the responsibility of maintaining a safe home is the landlord or the owner of the building. Without the knowledge of when funds might be available, when rent might be paid, or the guarantee that the tenants will recognize the other surviving parts of the lease, the quiet enjoyment and the safety of that home becomes in peril. If a boiler breaks, we need to make sure that those tenants have hot water during this time. We're going to have to look at those issues. It might be impossible to self-fund, and they'll have to go to a bank for a line of credit, just like mom and pop convenience store would have to come to us for a line of credit or a loan in order to fix those health and safety issues. So we do have to recognize a responsibility and duties lie on both parts. And that's something I've talked with a lot of small business owners who own apartments. I'd love to hear, though this is a communication, I don't want to turn it into too much of a debate. Mr. Milks, Mr. Walker, I believe you all own apartment buildings, not your primary source of income, but I did consult with you on things.
I can speak as a landlord. You know, I'm a small guy, but I'm in constant, pretty regular communication with my tenants anyway. And we've been talking about, and I'm already aware of who of my tenants are unemployed. And we're talking about, you know, how do we handle things going forward? And I've had tenants that have stayed and not been able to pay rent. And so I can speak for me only, but I think most landlords that are good landlords are already communicating with their tenants and have that sort of a communication back and forth. I can't speak for everybody, but I can certainly speak for the way that I'm handling it. And I think small people like me, I only have a few.
Can I ask you that, do landlords also have resources to help bridge resources to get them through that, so that if they are without income from rental properties, that they can also maintain their?
There's a small business administration, it's a disaster loan that you can fill out.
I've also asked the city manager to look at internal financial resources to provide health and safety funding through either a no interest loan or grant directly to our small multi-unit owners in town after demonstrable need, financial need. And we're looking at that right now. Hopefully we'll get that in the next couple of days in order to make that happen. It is a hole that no other community, frankly, is looking at. And I've had extensive and daily conversations with Mark Kerr, the mayor of Lewiston, about these as well. Just so everybody knows, Mayor Kerr and I are meeting daily over the phone and discussing what each city is doing in order to gain, along with other mayors, in order to gain intelligence and collaborate. It is something that they're looking at as well on their side of the river. So we are looking at that, and hopefully we can have something in place shortly. But the order stands, and in times like this, we have to make judgment calls. Dates may seem arbitrary to a lot of people, but they're the best dates we can have, best decisions we can make with the data that's in front of us. So going on to more communication, and I'm about done. Actually, and that was it. Oh, no, I'm sorry, committees. I've asked and pulled through Sue, the city clerk, various committees that are not intergovernmental or quasi-municipal or joint with Lewiston to ascertain whether or not we can push back the meeting by Zoom until we're kind of have more staff freed up and post the governor's executive order. I have heard back from a handful of committees. I will discuss those that I've heard back with right now, along with my recommendations based upon the questions that I asked them, which was, A, what have you just finished? What's still outstanding for old business that you need to accomplish? Do you feel comfortable having electronic meetings? And do you feel comfortable pushing off meetings for an additional 30 days? I believe, I'm not sure if the manager or assistant city manager have found out when our order postponing or canceling all committee members expires. I believe it's April 15th. Well, I'm not sure if you've got clarification on that, Peter or Phil.
Well, I think we need to follow up on that more, Mayor.
Okay. So here's the list of the committees urgently. CAC. The CAC committee needs to meet in order to establish or fulfill federal obligations with regards to our CDBG spending plans. Talked to Mr. Lenhart over at Economic Development about this, as well as Councilor Milk, the council's representative. And I'd like to have them starting to meet immediately via Zoom or as needed and pick up their regular schedule. That's a pretty hard federal deadline. I can't assume that will be pushed back. Second, recycling committee. They are a council ad hoc committee. That council ad hoc committee their term is set to expire in May. I'm going to recommend two things. One is that we allow them to have the Bates College presentation on recycling happen in April. At one of our next 3 April meetings / workshops. And I'd like the city manager to work with the committee on making sure that can happen electronically before those base students are released to the world, more so than they already are now. Second, I'd also like to have an order on our April 27th meeting, pushing back the deadline for work for recycle by 2 additional months, okay, till the end of July. I believe that will give them enough time, hopefully, at this point, to continue their work, either remotely or in person, depending upon the situation in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Other than that, the feedback is pretty much status quo. I will say conservation has met once to discuss pending referral from planning board. I'm going to encourage them to continue to do so electronically, not to conduct any other new business, but frankly, just to comment or discuss, and in this situation, had to do with solar panels in the agricultural resource protection zone. So anytime the planning board needs help or guidance from conservation, I'd like to let them go ahead and do that and fulfill that obligation, because that planning board is still statutorily required to meet, and they will need that support going forward. Other than that, all other committees I'm recommending at this time not meet until at least May 15th. Gives us some time to see and ascertain the situation over the peak, plus a couple extra weeks just in case we have a margin of error. So that's my update. Are there any questions about committee meetings? None? Very good then. I'll work with the city manager and the assistant city manager, making sure the appropriate orders are drafted and that communication happens. Councilor Lasagna?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Edward Little Building Committee is planning to meet again in April. I don't know what kind of committee that is.
Falls under the school board.
Okay.
That's on them. We provide representation to that committee, but anything that's quasi-municipal or intra-governor or intergovernmental, that's up to the owning body, if you would.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Manager, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I just would agree with you regarding the school building committee. They have work that they need to continue to do. I've served on these types of committees before, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I'll leave that up to, if they fall under the auspices of the school board, we'll let the school board handle that in meeting. Councilor Walker?
Whole different subject. Your big parade that we're supposed to have in the city, what's going to happen? Have you had any thoughts?
Well, I think we're just going to go in a big circle around New Auburn. 4 or 5 times maybe. Okay. We have had a lot of conversation. We have suggested alternate dates in late summer, early fall. We've kicked that up. Thank you to the city manager, both Lewiston and Auburn, for really working that issue. And that issue is now, the dates are being pushed out to the executive committee in Augusta, and they'll get back to us on that. But a very good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Councilor Walker. I mean, the parade right now is postponed, which was supposed to happen May 16th, will not be happening on May 16th. And as soon as we have a good date, we'll officially notify all the participants.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Could be bigger though, if we're lucky.
It could be very much bigger. Actually, that's great. That's a good attitude to have, Councilor Walker. It could be huge. And I know it would have been, I believe it will be. Be a good reason for everybody to get out. That's for sure. That's it under communication, though. Obviously, things are very dynamic. Do the councilors have any questions for me on something that has been mentioned that I've failed to communicate that you think is important for me to talk about? No? Very good. I'd like to start off and go into council communications now. And we'll start off to my left, virtually my left. Councilor Boss.
Yes, I have a couple updates. So communications, remind me, this is not for reporting out on our committees, correct?
Correct. You're right.
Okay. So forgive me. I was in the middle of a shuffle of my location to avoid children going out to bedtime and bath time. So I figured I would spare you all. But I actually do not have any updates at this time under communications. I will under reports later on. Thank you.
Very good. Councilor Walker.
I don't really have much other than I'll be so glad when the restaurants are back open. You know, I'm starving to death.
You know, they do deliver a lot of them. You have to go on the resource hub, Councilor Walker, and see the little map right there.
I'm tired of McDonald's.
Yeah. No comment. Thank you. Councilor Carrier,
Nothing at this time.
Counselor Milks,
Nothing at this time.
Counselor Lasagna. No, sorry, Counselor McLeod.
Nothing at this time.
Counselor Lasagna?
I want to mention, in terms of the Auburn website, that they've done a really good job of putting up that information for non-native English speakers, but also I mentioned that Mayor Levesque and Mayor Kerr participated in videotaping a short segment for the new Mainer population, also segments that were recorded from the religious leaders in the community, both the imams and also pastors of the churches, that talk again about the importance of social distancing and all of that. Because there was some misunderstanding within some of the new Mainer community about what this all meant. So somebody I work with said it would be really important to have the mayors of the two communities and be very meaningful that they got up there and also stated the importance of this. So that is going to be ready. I'll send it to Liz on Thursday, I think. It'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel. But we thank the mayors very much for participating in that. It's been very meaningful for the new Mainer community.
Very good. Counselor Gary?
Nothing to report this time, please.
Mr. Manager? You're coming in not.
You're not coming in.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not very often you get to say that, Kelsey. So we have some budget workshops coming up. There will be the budget workshop this Thursday, the CIP presentation. And then the budget workshop will cover several areas: city clerk, city manager, county tax, debt service, economic community development, emergency reserve, facilities and finance. Then that will be followed by a budget discussion. Then on the 13th, we'll continue with presentations from departments, and on the 16th as well. And then on the 27th, you should have an opportunity to be able to spend a lot of time talking about the budget at that point. And that will be followed up with a discussion on May 4th, which will be a continuation of your discussion regarding the budget. So there's a lot ahead of us in terms of the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is it for communications at this time. I'm going to open up the first open session of the night. Members of the public that would like to speak, please hit the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. I will call on anyone that would like to speak one at a time. Please bear with me while I do so. When called, I would ask that you state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. I will now wait to see if anyone raises their hand. Kelsey, do you see anyone that I'm not seeing?
No, sir. I only see two members of the public, neither of which have raised their hands this time.
I'm gonna give it just a little bit more time. If you're looking to raise your hand, you want to go over to chat participants. I've got one hand, I believe.
Yes, there is one labeled as Bill.
Okay, I don't see Bill here. I just see that there's a hand. So I'll call Bill, please. State your full name and Kelsey will take you on mute. Bill, are you there?
Still muted.
Bill, you'll need to accept the audio where I'm requesting you unmute.
There you go.
How's that?
That's good, Bill.
Okay.
I know that voice anywhere. That's Bill Sylvester.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right. That's me.
Okay.
I really enjoyed listening in tonight. And I just wanted to comment that the Ag Committee extension arm of conservation hasn't moved anywhere. And agriculture, forestry for this season is probably a pretty important thing. And I just wanted to add that in. And thank you for all you're doing, you folks.
Oh, hey, thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. You have anything else?
Oh, probably, but you don't want to listen to it.
Appreciate it, Bill. Glad you could join us. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak during this open session? I'm going to give it a couple, just another second.
Mr. Mayor, I would just add, just so the public is aware of it, we did create a public comment email for these meetings. The mayor and the council all received. We had one email that came in with a comment that's been sent out to the counselors, so you have that, and we'll also make that part of the minutes. So in the minutes, that will be reflected in the next meeting when we adopt the minutes.
Oh, very good. Very good then. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands coming up, so I'm going to close the first and only open session of tonight's meeting. We're going to move on to unfinished business at this point. We have a proposed ordinance for city council student representatives. Article 2, Division 3, sections 267-270. This is a second reading. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, I got a motion from Councilor Boss and a second from Councilor Walker. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but we're going to roll with that one. I'm going to open this up to the public for a hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? Kelsey, jump in here if I don't see anyone.
No, sir.
Okay. No one from the public is speaking. I'll bring it back to the council. Is there any debate? None being. I'll ask the clerk for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Moving on to new business order 44-04062020, approving amendments to the Auburn Lewiston Advisory Cable TV Committee. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion, Councilor Walker, second from Councilor Carrier. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Are there any comments from the public? Over here, none being. I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any debate on this?
No.
Okay, pretty easy then. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote at this time soon.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have an order on the table 45-04062020, authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute and deliver to Eagle Creek Renewable Energy LLC, affectionately known as Hackett Mills Hydro Associates, or their designee, a net energy billing credits agreement. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion from Councilor McLeod, a second from Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public at this time. Is there anybody from the public who would like to participate? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Mr. Manager, first, you want to give us the 30-second overview again, maybe for some other folks?
Well, as the staff report shows, this is going to provide some significant savings, approximately $125,000 per year. This is a good deal. You'll remember the discussion that we had back in February. This is in the best interest of the community. And I appreciate the work that's been done by Derek Belanger and the other folks who've been involved.
Very good. I'm going to bring it back to the council. Is there any council debate, discussion? None being, I'll ask the clerk for a roll call vote.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Next, order 46-04062020, authorizing the purchase of the fire department's new fire truck based on the provided bid, with $100,000 be provided as part of the FY21 capital improvement plan. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion, Councilor Walker, and a second from Councilor Milks. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment at this time? None being, I'm bringing back to the council. Council, this is something we talked about in workshop before. We already had 500,000 and change set aside in last year's budget for this. Is there any debate, discussion, clarification? None being, I'll ask the clerk for a roll call vote.
Counselor Carrier,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Motion
Mr.
passes.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Mr. McLeod had his hand up. You didn't see it. He had a question.
Before I declare the vote, Councilor McLeod. Thank you, Councilor Walker. Councilor McLeod, did you have a question?
No, it was more of a statement. I was going to let the vote happen. I just wanted to say that I think it was good that we separated the two budgetary years to purchase this fire truck, allowing them to go back and get the best deal, and then continuing to renew the funds as needed once we know that it wasn't just kind of a blank check situation.
Very good. Thank you for that. I'll now declare the vote 7-0. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Now, thank you, Councilor Walker, for that. Next, we have a resolve 06-04062020. This is limiting the increase of the school budget by $1.4 million and the drawdown of the fund balance by no more than 20% this fiscal year. Do I have a motion? I've got feedback. Do I have a motion on this resolve?
I'll make the motion for more discussion.
Well, the only way to have discussion is to have a motion.
Second.
Right.
Thank you. Yes, we have to bring the motion or resolve to the floor to have discussion. So I have a motion from Councilor Gary. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilor McLeod has a second. I'll open this up to the public first, then I'll bring it to the council. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this? Participants. I'm not seeing anybody from the public who would like to speak. Now I'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Let me just lead off, if I could, open up the discussion points. This is a resolve that we talked about introducing during our joint workshop with the school committee 2 weeks ago. A lot has happened since those 2 weeks. We've kind of kept you apprised of that, and especially Councilor Carrier, my representative to the school board. Right now, the situation is different. They have their health insurance came in significantly lower than initially anticipated, and we are in the middle of a pandemic. So I personally think that this 1.4 million cap is a moving target, and it's already changed. But I'll turn it over, if I could, first to Councilor Carrier, then we'll open it up for a full debate.
Yeah, there was a savings that was realized on the insurance this year of $242,000. We anticipated the rate to be 6%. It came in much smaller. There was this discussion the other night in regards to the use of that money in lowering the local and or utilizing part of it. Actually, 5 options for utilizing part of it to fund positions. They voted to go ahead with it, with funding part of a position, funding a position and then returning the remainder of it to the local. The budget also included using $200,000 from the fund balance to manage the budget this year. We did manage to come in at that budget. I think that there's probably still a little bit of room, but we came in at what you guys requested us to do. in regards to this, keeping the positions down, not really losing anybody. I think that there was an open position that we were concerned about, that we were worried about somebody losing their job, but we were told that there was an open position so that person would be able to have a job if they so chose to. There's just, my whole concern with this is we're in uncharted territory right now. I'm concerned that we may be losing more revenue. And I would rather put in at a later time than put in up front, but that's a decision that will have to be made here.
Anybody else? Councilor Lasagna?
Councilor Carrier, what would you suggest in terms of being able to bring this down further without doing damage to the department or the schools?
I think that we need to make sure that we've cut absolutely as much as we can out of the budget without cutting teaching positions. I would be remiss. Nobody wants to cut a teaching position. The teachers is where the rubber meets the road as far as that goes. And we're very concerned about improving our test scores and stuff. So losing teaching positions is not how we achieve that. I think that there are, still may be areas that we could probably look at maybe cutting back a little bit further on, insofar as maybe not getting into the fund balance for that amount of money. But it's about as austere as we could get it at that time. I still think that there may be a little bit left that we could do.
Yeah, ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
When we had a presentation from the school committee, it was probably a month ago, I can't remember, we got a red folder and there was information there. And one of the things that was in there is that the school committee members themselves felt that it was too administration heavy, that there needed to be a reduction in administrative positions. And I'm not pushing for that. I'm just saying this is something that the school committee mentioned when they were doing, and again, this was over a month ago and things have changed.
But we know that that hasn't happened. I do remember that elimination or minimizing of non-direct teaching administrative category.
It's something that pretty much all the committee members felt pretty much adamant about, is that if we have to lose positions, that we strongly need to look at administration rather than teaching. And that's not changed at all. That's still the feeling, that is that if we have to lose a position, it should come from administration.
And just to remind everybody, right now, if we look and focus this as a tax levy issue, $769,000, as the city manager explained a little bit earlier tonight, increase in the tax levy. That reflects out to, Mr. Manager, do you have that handy? Is that 30? I got 39 cents, a 39-cent increase to the mill rate pre any increases in valuation that the city might have. Right now, our mill rate's $23.75. All in, everything would be $24.52, with municipal increase of 4 cents, school at 39, intergovernmental at 35. So a total of 77 cents increase. Just again, to remind you all what the city manager said earlier. Do we think, and us, do we think, Brian or Councilor Walker, we'll go there before I ask the question.
I think it's a disaster if we go over 24. If we go back to when we had a couple different managers a few years back, I think that is what bit a lot of us in the butt and also hurt the managers that were here at the time. 24 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and the taxpayers, they're going to bite us in the butt if we pass a budget that's going to take us over $24 per thousand here, or whatever the number comes out to. It's just too high, and we need to bring this thing back under control. We're in a desperate place right now, and we have the power if we have to refuse raises, if that's what it has to be. It may be 6 months, it may be a year, I don't know. But we're in that position where you as the mayor and the manager can make that come under your powers, because I don't think we can afford to go over 24. The mill rate will just hurt us, and it will really, I believe, turn these people off in this city. We can't afford to have that happen. We could be 6 months before everybody gets back to work, maybe longer, but I'm going to say it could be 6 months. They can't take any more punishment than what we've given them in the last few years.
Councilor Gary, then I'll turn it over to Councilor Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not afraid to say I'll take it in the butt. I believe both budgets, both city and school, need to be cut. Given our economic conditions, or we don't know the unknowns or with our businesses or even our families. We need to do the best we can, and I believe we can do it by going even lower.
Is there another comment? Councilor Carrier, I believe it was. I'm sorry.
That's been my whole stick, and it was my issue when we had the meeting, is that I'm very concerned about how the budget is going to be affected by the loss of tax revenue. And as I said before, I would rather have it be bare bones going in and then maybe coming back and asking for more if things turn out a little bit better. But I mean, a couple of the items that we got, and I wished I could have shared them with you, we've gotten it down to 0.38. So I still think that there's a little there that we could utilize keeping local.
Is there a methodology here, folks, where we change this resolution via motion to say that the school committee's budget needs to come in at a $0 increase to the levy? And if there's anything higher, then we will look at it. You know, if they can present that, obviously we have to look at it anyways, we have to vote on it. But here's the underlying, and maybe I'm not gonna put into legalese language, but hey, if they want to add more teachers and folks, as I think when you rubber meets the road, Councilor Carrier,
yep.
They want to bring this down to zero increase on the levy, i.e. cutting 700,000 and change off the budget. They want to add back in 4 ed techs for a cumulative cost of $200,000. Bring it to us.
Right.
That's going to have a substantial, you know, we need to get those kids smarter. To get those test scores up. And I tell you right now, I can recognize that, you know, in the course of a given day of homeschooling for the last 2 weeks, there's a lot of downtime. And I'm not faulting teachers. I just think it's just kind of an interesting concept of if there are some more teachers, more work can be done. Mr. Manager?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I think in terms of what you're doing regarding the budget, I can appreciate where you're coming from because of what's happening with the pandemic and the effect on the community. On education, I would recommend, if you want to go lower than where the budget is now, which the mayor said is around 768,000, which I spoke about earlier, I think there should be a request of the superintendent, maybe the school committee chair, to see what the consequences are of those cuts and what does that mean to the quality of the education that the young people are receiving in the community. And that will help you make your decision. I believe quality education is really important. I know you all do as well.
Yeah, I agree. I hate to ask for a report already predetermined to be negative. Because you're already setting the stage for any cut whatsoever is going to be a negative. Their school budget has gone up this year. I'd like to look at it, frame it a different way. I think we're going to get it regardless if we ask for it or not, to be frank with you. I mean, this is my 3rd budget, so we'll see it regardless. But again, I think it might be interesting to start with a 0 increase on the levy. Again, I'll throw that out there as a concept for the city council to think about and talk about right now. And then let's go from there as a starting point.
Where is that 0? that number? Where's that number got to be?
Let me turn back.
Because I agree. Zero, I think, and that's what Councilor Walker was talking about as well. Zero increase in the levy.
Zero increase to the tax levy for fiscal year 21.
Yeah. So what's that number got to be?
That's a $769,000 decrease from their existing proposed budget.
I have a question. Wasn't the original resolve to meet their minimum statutory increases as a number, and then they needed to cut from that? So we said, here's your number because we know we have to give raises due to union contracts and whatnot.
Yeah.
Cut the rest somewhere else. So if we cut, we would then be almost double cutting because we still need to regulatorily or mandatorily give some of these increases to some of these teachers. So then we will be taking another step back from zero at that point.
Not necessarily, because you have to look at the overall budget. I think we keep talking about teachers. I think as Councilor Lasagna was pointing out, there was a desire by the school committee to cut non-direct teaching positions.
Yeah. And there also are increases to the special ed in the funding that we have to provide for that. We had provided at 82. We looked at raising that to 85. We originally looked at raising it to 90 due to increased costs, but we came back to 85 simply to make it a little more, I don't want to say palatable, but a little bit more reasonable of an increase. Those are costs that we really, can't control because it's out of town costs that we get from where we send our students. But, we've had it as low as 82. It's funding it at 85 is just giving us a little bit of a breathing room in case we have increased costs there.
And remember, the school committee does have over a month. We won't take final action to approve the school budget until May 11th. So, and I think, and there's also another variable here, folks, too. This school budget, after we approve this, regardless of what it is, we'll have to go to vote. That election in June could be pushed out to July. A lot of mayors advocated for us to revert to mail-in ballots. If that happens, we'll have a significantly higher voter turnout. And if we all fail to communicate that this is going to be an effective budget, whatever they end up submitting and whatever we pass, and if we're faced with 20% unemployment in June, you know that people will vote against that budget because they're going to vote with their wallets. And that's just the political reality of it. So there is a little bit of pressure coming in here with an increased voter turnout in this June election because it's going to be easier for people to vote. And downward pressure on their personal finances.
Mm-hmm. Could we have the city manager could talk with the finance director and give us some kind of idea? I mean, if we have diminished revenue per 1 quarter, for 2 quarters, and give us some kind of idea of what we're looking at as far as a loss of revenue for us, to give us sort of an idea of the percentages of what we're losing, and it'll give us an idea of what we'll have available.
We can do that. We're already tracking the revenues, and Jill speaks later. She's going to talk about this, and we can give you a more complete report as we move forward.
Have we had an evaluation of all the central office positions and what their roles and responsibilities are? We're always talking about teachers and teachers' aides and ed techs. I know there's a lot of salaries sitting down at central office.
And I will say that there's nothing specifically stating that we can't give direct recommendations. And a lot of times they're said, hey, you can only tell us what to spend. That's true. But it doesn't negate our voices as residents and elected officials. But before we went down that road, I have great faith in our school committee and school administration to do the right thing for the community and the students. And I'd like to give them a little bit of direction. so that they can go ahead and do that. And then we can come back and revisit this in a special meeting. Hopefully it doesn't get down to that level of granularity, Councilor Milks. Does that make sense? Councilor Boss?
I have a question about the need for a resolve as opposed to having consensus among us communicated to the school committee and superintendent's office.
There's only two ways this council can make communications happen: through a resolve and through an order. So we have to make a resolve, which is our voice. And that's how we get it done. We can't just say, okay, let's talk to the superintendent about making it all good or lowering it. So this is the only way that the selective body can actually make communications. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How much savings would the city realize if we froze or had the city manager freeze unnecessary spending for the remainder of the year?
I don't know if that's germane to this conversation because we're talking about the resolution on the school budget, though it's a great conversation to have, but I'm not sure if that is part of this conversation right now.
Just a quick response. We're already doing that and without formally making that a policy. We're asking all the department directors to only spend what is necessary and essential.
Councilor McLeod?
I'm not sure that 0 is right where we need to be, but I also want to make sure that we don't try to undercut some of the items that are getting reimbursed. Like the school buses are $200,000, so that will be well over the 0 that you were looking for or that we're looking at, but that will be reimbursed in the next year from the state side. So I want to make sure that we don't undercut some of that stuff, as well as I know some of the positions are either grant funded or get reimbursed or are billable in another way. So I want to make sure we don't cut any of that type of stuff out of the budget for the sake of making a number of 0, whereas a lot of that will get reevaluated and realized later down the road monetarily.
So if we cut, let's go on that. Just let me give you something else to think about with your decision-making process. If we took that $769,000 and we asked that to be cut by 50%, $375,000 instead of 0, that would decrease the increase in the mill rate by 19 cents, which would get our mill rate from 24.52 down to 24.33. Oh, excuse me. Yep, 24.33, without any additional cuts on the municipal side, intergovernmental, or an increase in valuation. So it definitely gets us, I think, within striking range. And I will say to Councilor Walker's point about that $24 Mendoza line, this book, Auburn, the First 100 Years, during the turn of the 19th century, for 20 years, they struggled to keep that Mendoza line, the mill rate at 20. And it kept going back and forth between 19 to 21. And mayors were getting termed, left and right. It was a bloodbath. So this is not a unique situation for Auburn in our history or any other municipality. So, but I think that I agree with Councilor Walker, $24, that's a psychological impact, especially if we're trying to increase economic recruitment of new business and residents.
I'm sorry. Oh, did you call me? What's the Mendoza rate?
No, the Mendoza line.
What's the Mendoza line?
I'm not gonna go into details, but it's a political line, demarcation, if you would, like the 38th parallel. You don't cross the 38th parallel. That's like the line of, diminishing returns, or you can't come back with.
Well, it's not an economic calculation. It's just
I feel like a theatrical. If I remember correctly, I'm going to have to dig deeper. Peter, remember the Mendoza line? You guys got to watch late night.
It's a historical.
You go laugh at this. The only Mendoza line that I'm aware of is in baseball. So
wait, no, that was a Mendoza line. Was baseball, wasn't it? Anyways, think a line that you don't want to cross.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question.
That's right.
Do we know, does the school budget take into account all the money that's coming from the state? Is there any last minute money that comes in after the vote comes through on the budget? Or is it all, we know exactly what they're going to give us today?
I've talked with the superintendent I think this is the money she's going to get.
Okay.
I don't think there'll be any more.
And the Mendoza line is the shortstop, Mark Mendoza. Anything below his batting average was like, you should be in the MLB. That was it.
Okay.
That took me a minute. It's so late.
Not an economic principle, just for
Baseball.
clarification.
The Mendoza line, but it's used everywhere by everyone, in geopolitical circles, I guess. But so I think, with all this conversation, if we want to vote up or down on the 1.4 million, that will send a message, yes or no. If we say hold it to 1.4, listen, they already are there, so it's a moot point. You can make we can have a motion to amend the resolution from the floor with a new number, and that can be voted on to amend the resolution's language, and then we'll vote on the new resolution. So I'll leave it at that. Councilors, we do have a motion on the floor.
And it's currently at 770 or something?
No, it's currently at 1.4 million on the resolution.
But Councilor Carrier, I guess I'm confused, but the number that they cut down to is 700, or is it still at 1.4?
We're at the 1.4.
So, Councilor Milks, right now, they are at $769,000 for a tax levy. That's additional money they'll need from the local taxpayers.
Understood.
That's correct.
So this was their whole budget, and this is what we talked about by 1.4. So if there's going to be any,
we decided to cut, so if we wanted to cut that tax levy in half and give them direction, we would do an amendment to this?
a motion to amend the resolve, capping the school budget increase to X dollars of taxable levy.
Yeah.
There's probably a better way to phrase that, Mr. Manager.
I would
I would agree
suggest,
with that. I think using tax levy is the right term.
Okay, thank you.
but I would suggest that we don't give them a number, because what are we basing it on? We're not looking at everything they're working with. I think if we want them to come back with something different, that we just vote down this amendment, this resolve. And they're going to be watching this and know what
We cannot communicate outside of written order or resolve as a city council. And I have to, that's the rules set up in the charter, just assuming communications and messaging without a clear vote and record is not how this body or elected body can act.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that my suggestion is to vote this down and have them come back to us instead of giving them a certain
They
number.
don't have to come back to us, because if we have no messaging, we will have no messaging. So as the budget is right now, we'll stand.
We have to, in other words, we have to tell them something
We
in writing.
absolutely have to give them guidance on where their budget needs to come in at.
So if
Doesn't
we
mean they
cut
have to
that,
follow it to the T. We'll still end up voting on their final budget, but we have to give them guidance on what their budget is, and we have yet to do that. Hence why this resolve is here in front of us tonight.
so we'd be reducing that, if we cut it in half, say, to 350, it would be reducing that 1.4 to $1 million.
No.
No, it would be reduced.
Apples and oranges. Councilor McLeod, you have something to say?
So if this is the first resolve that's coming to the table, how did the school department, the school committee get to 1.4, the paring down to that already?
If you remember what I said during the joint workshop, I said this is not formal request. I will be introducing a resolve in the next meeting to cap your increase at 1.4. They took it upon themselves to go with that guidance and craft a budget that worked within that. In that 2.5, 3 week period, the climate in our city, state, and country has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
But they can also, as easily as choosing to follow verbal, non-binding cue, they can also choose not to. So that's why I was very, very clear. That's not binding. This is my opinion. Okay. It will be introduced, but that's as far as I can go. Okay? But that, this is part of negotiations as well. So, but they do need a binding direction from this council, giving them direction.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor.
I'd like to, so we can move this forward, I'd like to make a resolve that we asked them to come down $350,000 more. And if we have a second, we can at least vote on it.
I have a motion on the floor to amend the resolve, asking the school capping. Can I pull that up on the screen, please? So I can read this. And Councilor Walker, you need to tell me if I misinterpret your words. On paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, let it be resolved that in this state, the City Council resolved to limit the increase in the school budget by $1.1 million. And do you want it read like that? Or do you want it read that on this date, the City Council resolved to limit the increase in the tax levy to $300,000 or $400,000?
I like that one better. The levy increase not more than 350,000.
350 is your number?
Yeah.
I have a motion on the floor from Councilor Walker.
Second.
I will cap the increase of the school committee budget to $350,000 in tax levy to the residents of Auburn. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion from Councilor Walker and a second from Councilor Milks. Any debate on this amendment to the resolve before I call a vote?
Can we get more information on the reason for the 350, just so that we have this a shared understanding of that number and where it came from?
Well, I think my reason is that it looks like to me the zero may be a little bit asking a little more than what they could withstand. But I think they came down to that 1.4 million without too much discussion and arguments with anybody. And I think they can find another 350,000. And then the city will have to do their best to come down so that we bring both budgets down to very close to the zero.
And I would leave in about the fund balance. No more than 20% of the fund balance.
We only amended that one, I think it was paragraph 3.
Yep.
In this amendment. Is there any other debate? Councilor McLeod?
Can we add can I add a friendly amendment to that?
No.
Okay.
You can, after this is tabled or after this vote is concluded, you can make a motion to add an amendment, or you can amend the result further.
And that's because it received a second already, or?
Correct. This is the motion that's on the floor. And it's just the parliamentarian way of doing it. We have to deal with this one motion, either up or down. And then we can look at several other amendments to the resolve, and then we'll have to vote on the entire resolve, okay, as amended.
Yeah.
This is non-binding. This is just direction towards the.
This is a resolve. They will still present their school budget, okay, to us. What we're basically telling them is, in order to get a yay vote, your budget needs to be about here. Okay. This also helps us look at what the potential mill rate is when we're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. Municipal, school, intergovernmental.
That's right. They could refuse it. They could refuse it.
They could come back and say, well, we think it needs to be 500 and whatever.
And have a pile of good reason, and we could still vote up on that if that's what it came back at.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
This is the resolve, not an order. Okay. Is there any other debate? None being, I'm going to ask the clerk to do a roll call vote on the amendment to the motion to amend the resolve.
Carrier,
Yay.
Councilor Walker,
Yes.
Councilor Boss,
Yes.
Councilor Gary,
Yes.
Councilor Lasagna,
Yes.
Councilor McLeod,
Yes.
Councilor Milks,
Yes.
Okay, the motion to amend the resolve stands, so I vote a 7-0. We still have the resolve now amended on the table. Councilor McLeod, do you have any amendments?
I had a question if we could ask that they don't eliminate any, in this elimination, if they don't eliminate any teachers, ed techs, interventionalists, since we're also asking them not to decrease their fund balance and a couple other things. Is that something we can request, or is that just not monetary and it doesn't really matter on this?
To be honest with you, I think I need to check with the charter a little bit more on that. I've read it a couple of times. And, like I said before, we are residents first and foremost and elected representatives of the city of Auburn as well. But I think before we go into that, that's something that we can talk about but I'm not sure if an official resolve or order dictating that direction can be applied.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say this, you can give them bottom line direction on the budget, but you can't give them line item direction.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, is there any more debate? If not, I'm going to call the motion to a vote as amended. None being, I ask the clerk to call a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Carrier,
Yay.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Boss,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor McLeod,
Yes.
Counselor Milks,
Yes.
The result passes unanimously, vote of 7-0. Okay, moving right along. Mayor's report. I've given you my communications. I've had nothing else to report on. City Councilors reports. We'll start off opposite direction. We'll start off with Councilor Gary.
The only thing I can report is I've been helping deliver some of the meals from the senior center to needy seniors. And I've also helped deliver green ladles and meals to Auburn residents.
Thank you. Councilor Lasagna.
Just quickly that we will have a date, hopefully by the end of the week, when Bates students somehow will be presenting their information to the recycling committee, and we'll report on it.
Clarification of that. I got word from the recycling committee that the Bates presentation was going to be jointly to them and the city council.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
Okay, very good.
Correct.
Councilor McLeod.
Just that LATC is meeting on the 15th of this month to discuss some regulatory items that have not been delayed or pushed back due to the pandemic. So it'll be a quick meeting, but we have to have it.
Very good. Councilor Milks.
The water department is going to be Auburn. The water department's going to be meeting on the 15th. We're still in that figuring out the technologies. A lot of kind of not necessarily technologically savvy. So we're trying to figure out what that agenda is going to look like. I'm not sure whether the sewer department is going to meet or not. But the water is going to meet on the 15th. So, and I know Zach and I are going to get the Mr. Leonard, get that CAC very quickly, get that done.
Very good. On that, I'm sorry, and I one thing I should have mentioned before, CDBG loan committee. There are some pending loans. There might be some authority currently in the regs for the city manager to approve those in consultation outside of formal action. We're going to check on that. So just I forgot that they kind of tie in together. So we've been in communication with the chair of the CDBG. Moving along, there'll be Councilor Carrier.
The airport board will not be meeting this month, but they did notify us that the construction started back today on the runway. They'll be working on 1735, which is the one that runs crossways across the airport. They'll be building a new taxiway to accommodate that, and there'll be some changing to the lightings, and the electric work will continue out there as well. And that's it.
Councilor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you to Public Works there. Joe Gray had picked up about 100 old tires on the side of the road out in the south end of Auburn and piled them up for us over the weekend. And Public Works was notified this morning, and they went out there and picked up everything and cleaned it up. And that was very quick, so they didn't end up back in the woods or rolling down the road somewheres. So thank you very much for their quick service.
Councilor Boss.
Yeah, an update from the library. I just received an update from Maine, and she informed everyone that we already know that the library has been closed indefinitely, but that they will be furloughing staff starting April 10th. That's about 15 individuals. And they have only a bare bones crew of essential staff who are staying to maintain basic services and building maintenance, et cetera. So that's, another sad reality of what's happening. The next meeting of the Board of Trustees for the library will be on April 21st, and it'll be, I think, electronically. And then also for the Court Street study, I checked in with AvCog. They are requesting an additional extension on that process. It was intended to finish April 1st, but they're requesting an additional extension given what's happening. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Manager?
You've already heard a lot of the good things that staff are doing from Phil and Matt and earlier comments. I cannot tell you how impressed I am with the staff. It doesn't surprise me, but they're doing a great job all the way around. I appreciate what Council Walker said. That's just one example of the staff doing, I think, really a great job. And I want to give a special thanks to the emergency responders, police officers, firefighters, the public works folks that are out there. But everybody is contributing and doing something, and you can be proud of the work that's being done. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, I'd like to move on to Ms. Eastman at this point. Jill, you're live.
Thank you. You have the February report, which is kind of out of date right now, but since we're at the end, actually March is done, and I'm working on that report. But at the end of February, things looked really good, and our revenues were higher than last year, and our expenditures were higher, but there was a reason for that. I did some posting of TIF transfer and workers' comp transfer earlier than last year. That's the only difference. That's about the majority of the difference on the expenditure side. I have been closely monitoring the revenues through this whole period. I started about a week ago and have been watching them, almost every day. I started working on the report for March this week, actually this morning. And on the revenue side, we're fine for the month of March. And I haven't gotten to the expenditures yet, but I think we'll see it slow down in April because, of course, there's no one there. However, my staff is answering calls and doing as much as they can to help people who need services from the tax office. Of course, we have a lot of stuff that's available online as well, but we're still posting revenues that are coming in. We get stuff every morning. We get a report, and they are answering phone calls and taking care of staff. And like Peter said, we did ask the staff to watch their discretionary spending for the rest of the year. So hopefully that'll help us through. And I will continue to monitor. If I see any red flags, I will definitely let you know.
Jill, do you think you'll have by May 4th an understanding and new valuation of the city of Auburn, new taxable valuation for this coming fiscal year?
Probably we can give you a pretty close idea. I know that the assessing department are working on it all the time, and they have to go out to all of the businesses a lot of the new construction before April 1st, which they have tried to keep doing, and they have been going out on some of those because they need to know what, as of April 1st, where they were. That's the cutoff date for assessment is April 1st. So now they have to compile all that data, and I think Karen can give us an estimate, educated guess, if you will. She won't be able to give us a perfect number by May 4th, but we should have a fairly good idea.
Okay, and Mr. Manager, I'd like to, we can talk about it a little bit later on as well, but I'd like to make sure that is in the meeting agenda for May 4th. And the meeting date is not arbitrary. That is the last meeting before we adopt the school budget vote. which will be Monday, May 11th. And again, like I said before, all these conversations are pieces of a pie. And that will be that 11th hour understanding of what potential new taxation revenue is going to be at, which will then influence the mill rate, the final outcome. So that'd be, I just want to make sure that we have that on our radar.
Will do. I'll send her an email in the morning.
Okay, do we have any questions for Jill right now on the financial report? Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not so much a question about the financial report, but kudos to his staff. I've had at least 2 constituents that couldn't come in, one to pay the taxes and another one to pay his car registration. Both of them are disabled and one is a senior. Her office made every effort to come outside and help these 2 individuals get their stuff all resolved. And so I want to be, they were very appreciative, and I am too.
Thank
Because
you.
this is examples of what our staff is doing and how they go out of their way to help all Auburn residents.
Very good. Great. Is there any other comments or questions about the financial report? None being, I'm going to entertain a motion at this point to place the finance report on file for February.
Removed.
Okay.
A motion from Councilor Carrier, second from Councilor Walker. Any debate? None. Sue, roll call vote, please.
Counselor Carrier.
Yay.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Counselor Boss.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna.
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Counselor Milks. Counselor Milks.
Can't hear you.
He's muted.
You're muted. There you go.
Yes.
Very good. The motion passes 7-0. Next, we have an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA, section 405. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Boss, second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor, I need a roll call vote on this one, please.
Counselor Carrier.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Counselor Boss.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna.
Yes.
Counselor McLeod.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Before I call the vote, I just want to let everybody know that might be watching this, that we'll go into executive session. We'll come out, we'll go back into executive session, then we'll adjourn. There'll be nothing else broadcast on TV because of the nature of the executive sessions, of course. So I'm going to give us about 3 minutes here to close down the public participation and screen those individuals out. Then we'll reconvene for our executive session. Motion passes 7-0. Stay on the line, folks, if you could.